this time.
I'm just trying to figure out how to juggle our lunch break. All right, I'll figure it out.
Mr. President, we are now live.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon. We are now reconvening the hearing for the FY2024 budget. That we had the city solicitor's office. We are now continuing the district attorney's testimony and question. And Chair had a question from Councilman Thomas. Mr. DA, are you prepared to?
Yes,
to
sir.
answer?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Thomas. You had two questions. One was about tags, temporary tags, false tags. I consulted with a few people here, including Joanne Pescator from the homicide, who was the chief of the homicide non-fatal shooting unit. What we are seeing just as stolen cars and jacked cars are being used in gun violence crimes for the purpose of concealing identity, sometimes an extra step is taken, frequently, in fact, which is either a license plate is lifted from another car and is put onto that vehicle, or you have a situation where there is either a real or a false temporary tag, sometimes from other states, which is part of a process of trying to conceal identity. I'm sure the issue is bigger than that, because that universe is really just cars used in gun violence. But we are seeing that, and it confirms your point that there's a significant problem with phony tags. On your question about wiretaps, I have a partial answer, but better than that, I have the one who knows. Paul Riddell, who is a very experienced prosecutor and the chief of our dangerous drug offender unit, supervises a lot of the wiretap activity, including when the DEA calls us, which they do, to say, will you work with us on a wiretap, because for some reason it's better to have us involved in it. He has been involved recently with a multi-year massive investigation of Philadelphia drug dealers who were going directly to Mexican cartels. This turned into an international investigation involving millions of dollars and enormous piles of kilos of illegal drugs. It had international dimensions, not just in Mexico, but elsewhere. Mr. Riddell should have some information with you, which I'll ask him to give you very quickly, on the price of running a wiretap per year or per month. Mr. Riddell?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Council, yeah, if I could just describe in brief what we do. Basically, our unit takes work with the First Judicial District, essentially with the Eastern District of Pennsylvania Federal Prosecutor's Office. We work a lot hand in hand with DEA and DDOU, work cases together. So many times any case they don't take, mostly because they don't have time or they don't have the manpower to do that work, is we're getting federal jobs to do locally. The cost of doing a wire we use as an estimate of $30,000. Talking to my sergeant, for the actual cost to monitor that line, which is inclusive of the officers.
Per month or per year?
Per month, $30,000 per month. Based on the fact that we have to pay multiple officers, it depends how many lines we may run. That means how many individual phone lines we may be wiretapping. It's a very expensive cost to do that. We generally partner them with our Fed associates. Sometimes we do state wires along with the Pennsylvania State Police. So
Paul, how many police personnel do you need to run a wire 24/7?
Generally, we'll need, so to really do it adequately, we'll probably need anywhere from 6 to 12 officers. We're running kind of low right now currently with our staff. We'll have about 8 DADs and PPD were assigned to the DA's office to work those lines, but that means they're sitting in a room and they've got to go through phone call after phone call. And as you may know, most phone calls aren't going to be the kind of phone calls that are going to lead us to drug dealing, but you have to go through all those calls. Then we have to minimize calls that are privileged and all that. But then you have folks who are doing their business, because many phone lines are used in par with let's say, their regular business. So they may be ordering pizza from the same phone number they're doing their drug dealing business. More sophisticated drug dealers will have separate lines for individual dealers. Our largest wiretap involved a guy who was carrying at least 8 phones personally and knew all his phone numbers personally and knew who was going to call them, from Sinaloa cartel members to transportation to his local associates were the ones who were going to do pickups and drop-offs for him.
So Paul, I don't want to cut you off, but we have a limited time here.
Yeah.
If you got 8 different lines going, do you have a sense of how many law enforcement personnel, in addition to the price you already mentioned, how many law enforcement personnel does it take full-time to do that for a month?
I would say to do it, to just keep up our head above water, I'd say we'd need at least 12.
Okay, so we're talking then X dollars, $30,000 a month plus 12 law enforcement personnel. Understand that if PPD had the personnel and if we had a collaboration that would work in that regard, it wouldn't necessarily have to be personnel on our payroll, on the DA's payroll. It could be PPD personnel as well, but obviously we know what some of the staffing issues here. So if we then were to take this number per month of about $30,000, annualize that, you got 360 grand. If we take 12 law enforcement and we make a wild guess that they're $100,000 a piece, then you're looking at $1.5 million basically for a full year of an intensive multi-line wiretap. A lot of these wiretaps are not full year. A lot of them will be for 3 months or 6 months. So it may be for that $1.5 million, what you could actually get would be 2, 3, or 4 big time wiretaps. Not every wiretap is going to involve that many lines, but that is an example of a massive and successful effort to cut off, frankly, one of the biggest drug suppliers I've ever heard of in my career.
Thank you, D.A. Krasner. Thank you for that explanation. As a person who feels like The Wire is the greatest show of all time, that was really helpful. I gotta stop because I'm holding up lunch. So that's it. That's the end for me. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleague.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity. Councilman Harity, you back? And we reach out. And he took an early lunch. Councilman Jones, I know you said you did not have any questions. Are you still of that mindset? Okay.
I would be rude to come in at the tail end and ask every question that has already been asked and answered. So I will pass on the opportunity, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Chair recognizes Councilman Phillips.
And thank you for testimony today.
Councilman,
the question I have.
Councilman, hold on.
Oh,
your technology
yeah, is bad.
Yeah. Can you
okay.
adjust it? Try to come back in.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, perfect. So, hi, District Attorney, thank you so much for your testimony today. Appreciate you coming forth to council. We've learned a lot, and hopefully we got some charges that we can take back with us to the drawing board to grow, to make a difference in our community, which is really important. Number one, I just have my camera on because I think there's some technology issues where I'm at. But I simply want to ask, can you talk more about the work that you're going to do in this particular cycle around youth and supporting young people with alternatives that maybe have low-level offenses that they end up being, caught in. And so how we can position them to maybe get jobs with maybe the building trades or other entities that can maybe, as opposed to going right to the prisons or, prison system, they can have an opportunity for rehabilitation. Can you talk more about some of that work that you can do, that you will be doing in the budget cycle around that? Thank you.
Councilmember, thank you so much for the question. The good news is that Bob Listenby has returned from court. G. Lamar Stewart has returned from his funeral. I'm going to ask that Mr. Listenby come forward and try to give you a concise answer to that important question.
Good afternoon, Council President, council members. The District Attorney's Office began, when we began our efforts to reform our juvenile justice unit, we focused on looking at low-level offenses and offenses that we could divert. In 2018, we were diverting about 13% of our cases, and we have increased that number to about 21%. We focus on a number of different kinds of cases or different kinds of opportunities. We try and find employment opportunities for young people, educational opportunities, opportunities that provide them with unique experiences. For example, a lot of our young people come to us with restitution orders from the court. And what we try and do is we try and find ways for them to do work while being diverted to actually pay off the restitution, so the victims are taken care of while at the same time doing interesting and exciting work. We have boxing, hairdressing, barbering, referral to the trades, and other kinds of opportunities that are available. We're thankful for support from the Department of Human Services that's provided us over $1 million to go from having 8 programs to 28 separate programs that address the unique needs of youth.
Thank you. So my next question has to do with the balance between, so in our community in the 9th District, we have a lot of catalytic converter theft. And what I want to learn more about is, what is the District Attorney's Office doing to really crack down on catalytic converter theft this particular budget cycle to make sure that we get a handle on this as much as possible?
Yeah. Council member, I'm not trying to be rude here. I was just checking in with Kim Essick, who is here at the moment, who runs our economic crimes unit. And although it's not the main thing that she does, we do have a unit, part of whose job is to try to deal with car theft and catalytic converter theft, which of course is a pretty significant problem all over the city, including in the Northwest, where I spent 26 years before I got a new job.
Right.
So maybe Kim can shed a little bit more light on that, but we share your concern. It's an incredible inconvenience for working people who don't have, how shall I put it, Donald Trump money. It's an incredible inconvenience when you try to go out and drive to work and it sounds like your car is a hoopty.
Right. Well, we certainly just put together some legislation that Councilwoman Bass put together around this to kind of do prevention work around this area, and so just trying to look to see how we can support the enforcement of it. So just wanted to go forth with getting some responses on that. That pretty much all of us co-sponsored on this legislation around catalytic converter theft, and we're hoping that it does help with some prevention efforts.
Good afternoon, Council. As I spoke earlier, I do work in the deed theft area, but I was recently informed that the auto theft unit would now be coming under my division as well. So with that, catalytic converters, as my understanding, was a big focus of the unit before it came to me. I've already had major crimes reaching out and wanting to collaborate on different investigations they have ongoing, which do include catalytic converters. I don't have anything to present to you today on this, but I can assure you that is going to be one of the primary focuses because it is something that affects so many people in Philadelphia. And it's been something that has been so easy to do in order to pop under a car and get that. I know that they want to talk about preventative measures as well, but it is something that when we have an investigation going, that we do plan to devote a lot of time to.
I can answer.
Thank you. And I was also in a community meeting the other day where a lot of our neighbors were heavily disappointed and just a lot of charge around this particular issue around people selling merchandise, as well as, doing, for example, merchandise, as well as even doing auto repairs outside, as opposed to within inside of an establishment. What are we doing when it comes to the prosecution of people who are literally selling merchandise outside, what they call the outside businesses and so forth, as opposed to being actually inside a business that you actually have to pay rent on? And I just wanted to make sure that we have some sort of follow-up on that type of work as well.
Sure. Let me, if I may, Kim Essick does a great job in her role, but I can tell you, I had a lot of conversations with the person who used to be in charge of this work, who has now retired, basically my age. She's got more sense than me, so she retired. And obviously what's going on in the Northwest and many other areas is that people are hopping out of cars. They will go under a vehicle with a variety of tools. They will have that catalytic converter out of there in 60 seconds. They'll go down the street, they'll hit another car, they'll have that one out of there in 60 seconds. And because catalytic converters contain precious metals, they're worth a bunch of money. This is a big national problem. There was a warehouse somewhere in the Midwest that was busted with millions of dollars worth of catalytic converters. Needless to say, our issue is we can't prosecute what doesn't get caught. And we know that the staffing difficulties that PPD has, but we are 100% with you in coordinating. I got no patience for people who go up and down blocks and make it hard for people who are just trying to work and take care of their families to drive around. So if we can get these investigations, we will appropriately and vigorously prosecute them. As far as people doing auto repairs outside, I just want to be clear, we don't prosecute people. There is no crime I'm aware of for people simply engaging in commerce outside. That sounds to me more like an issue that would be addressed by the law division, unless it's stolen goods. If you're talking about stolen goods, that's a crime all day long, or unless you're talking about people who are actually violating pollution laws, which can happen with street corner mechanics, where they're dumping stuff in places they shouldn't. As a former street corner.
That's what I'm talking, street corner mechanics and some illegal goods, but yes, yep.
Okay, as a former street corner mechanic myself, I mean, there's a proper rule for just people trying to make a living, but obviously if any of it rises to the level of stolen goods or it rises to the level of pollution or some kind of serious nuisance in the community, then we do have a role, and we're happy to work with you on that.
Yes, definitely would love to work with you on that, because for us in the area that we live in, it's about quality of life. And I think a lot of we can find a way to help the street corner mechanics find a place to do their work in a reasonable place. That would be important, because we definitely don't want to disrupt their work. But for some people, it becomes more of an eyesore, a hangout spot, among a lot of other issues that come up with it as well, noise, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that we work together, this cycle around that issue. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. CA, did you have a response to that beyond what you said?
Other than we're delighted to work with you all day long. G. Lamar Stewart has returned. He actually had a comment. If you have time, but I understand, Council President, you're behind. All right.
Okay.
Council President, how you doing, sir? And Councilmember Phillips, I just wanted to respond to your to your first question around engagement with youth. One of the things that the Community Engagement Unit does, a few things I want to mention, but one in particular, at least once a week at minimum, if there's any downtime, our staff within our Community Engagement Unit, we do business and community corridor canvassing. And so in the 9th District, we've been all throughout Wadsworth Avenue, as well as the Ogons Avenue corridor and some of your other business corridors, not only just engaging with the businesses, but also young people who after school hours are just out there. And that gives us an opportunity to really speak with them about alternatives. And so because we have relationships with community-based organizations in the 9th and throughout the rest of the city as well, we're able to direct them in the appropriate paths to community-based organizations in the 9th District, organizations such as Men Who Care of Germantown, amongst other organizations who are doing incredible work in your district and throughout. We're also partnered with 14 schools citywide, in which once a month we're in several of those schools engaging with groups of young people. We just had a meeting with about 25 students at Mathematics, Civics, and Sciences High School. All 25 of them either lost a family member, a parent, or a sibling to gun violence in the last few years. We've been supporting them by bringing in our trauma partners, our trauma care partners, to address their trauma before that trauma turns into something in another direction. And so we remain committed both through the school year and even in the summer months, working with those school principals to provide them a certain level of support in a very preventative way. And then lastly, I'll say our unit also responds to crisis incidents in the city. Of course, CARES responds to every homicide, but if there's a young person that's shot in the city, or young people that are shot, we respond to that community as well, because there's always a group of young people around that young person who's frustrated, who's angry, who's upset, and we're trying to guide them in the right direction before that turns into some type of retaliation. And so we work around the clock to ensure that young people know what their resources are within their community, that they don't have to commute across the city and wind up engaging people in other neighborhoods that may be in other turfs or territories, but we try to make sure that they remain connected to some of the grassroots work that's happening right in their neighborhood.
Thank you, G. Lamar. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I will certainly follow up with your office around the catalytic converters as well as the street corner mechanics and the youth programming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Prez will be back with us in about 15 minutes. Are there any other questions?
Councilmember Jones, I was supposed to be first in the queue for a second round, and I guess I was in the restroom or something. I got skipped.
That's quite all right.
Some follow-up questions.
I'm right back to you. Member Harity, please state your questions for the district attorney.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. District Attorney. I wanted to just follow up on my question about the charging of the retail theft. I pulled up a document entitled Philadelphia DAO New Policy Effective 15/2018, which states charge lower gradation for certain offenses and continues charges and dispose of retail theft cases as summary offenses unless the value of the items stolen in a particular case exceeds $500 or where the defendant has a very long history of theft and retail convictions. It also states that you must seek supervisory approval to charge for or dispose of retail theft cases at a misdemeanor or a felony level. However, under 18 PA/CS Section 3929, retail theft constitutes a summary offense only when it is the first offense and the value of the merchandise is less than $150. Can you justify this deviation of the law? And is it really the police department which determines charges, or does the ultimate authority lie in the district attorney's office? And is the district attorney's office considering revising or rescinding this guidance? And if so, when would the guidance be issued?
All right. So point one, Councilmember Harity, you're looking at a policy from 45 days into our administration. We're now 5 years in, and there have been some discussion and some modifications. However, the fundamental notion is correct, which is that it is either going to be charged as a summary, a misdemeanor, or a felony. And we have made the legally correct and accurate choice, should we choose to do so, to charge the lesser offense where we think it is going to promote public safety. So as you can see, consistent with what I've said earlier today, when we think people are just doing it, we're going to bring the higher levels. When we think that they're coming in and this is an isolated instance or they haven't done it much and they're dealing with mental health issues, homelessness, drug addictions, things of that sort, we're going to charge it as a summary for a whole lot of good reasons. I could go into them, but I know we don't have time to go with that. There is no inconsistency about a prosecutor's office saying this is third-degree murder, not first. This is involuntary manslaughter, not third-degree murder. These are discretionary decisions that we not only make all the time, the law says we should make and we have to make. In the same way, we might decide that someone who drove at 100 miles an hour to get his wife to the emergency room when she was about to have a baby, in the same way, we might say, I'm not going to bring any criminal charges, or if I do, I'm going to bring the lowest one. We can make that decision when we think it is in the best interest of society. This approach did not originate in Philadelphia. It has originated in other places, and it has proven over the years to be far more successful than doing things like working with a particular financial cutoff or treating everybody as if one size fits all, and then filling your jails with broke, mentally ill, drug addicted people who committed 2 retail thefts of food. So that's why we came with the
But it's
policy.
a quality of life issue in my neighborhood. I get what you're trying to do, Mr. District Attorney. I'm an addict. I was charged. That for me had to be done. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got to where I'm at now. Trying to give these people life. Some of them are going to have to be arrested. Some of them have to go to jail. It's not, I have it rampant in my neighborhood. I don't think you're getting the severity of what's going on in my neighborhood. And I get you don't live there, but I do. And I have to deal with my neighbors on a daily basis. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but we need some help down there. We need enforcement. We have no stores. There's no place for us to shop because of this stuff going on. So that leads me to believe that these are repeat offenders. So they need to be charged. And I'm sorry, I just don't get it. This is a quality of life issue, and I get if it's not happening in the volume that it is happening in my neighborhood. I get it. My neighborhood's not a good neighborhood, but we have residents there that are good people, and this is affecting them. And the fact that we're not, I get that we don't want to give them criminal records. I'm all for that. I'm for that 110%. But we need to get them into other programs. And if charging them with a misdemeanor, if that's the case, to get them into AMP court in order to be able to send them away, in order to start treatment and at least get their head that there is treatment and that they can recover, because that's another thing and another issue. Half of them don't even know about recovery out there. But I don't see how letting them get away with this on a daily basis is going to help the neighborhood or bring down crime. It's actually raising the crime in my neighborhood. My city vehicle got broken into the other night. I mean, they took my gym bag, box of cigars. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, but you know, it's not right. And this is what my neighbors and my residents in Kensington and in other sections of the city, I know it's happening in South Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. I mean, these guys, they're just walking around stealing stuff on a regular basis. And at some point, enough has got to be enough. I get it. But, you know, we got to start thinking about people that actually live in the neighborhood, citizens that have to deal with this on a daily basis, because this is messing their quality of life up.
So, council member, if I may respond, I think there's several things that are misunderstood in this discussion. This office does not turn down retail theft cases, ever, ever, ever. They come in different flavors. One is a summary offense, and the Philadelphia Police Department has the unilateral authority to bring a summary charge. They can do that all day long. They can do it every day. If the Philadelphia Police Department has the staffing, has the time, gets the phone calls from store owners who have their own obligation to play a role, they can charge that all day long, all the time. The fact is the Philadelphia Police Department is bringing that about half as much as they did 5 years ago, and I have no role whatsoever in that. I'm not the one with the ticket book. I don't have the handcuffs, and I don't have the pen. Okay, those are the facts. So whoever is feeding you or feeding anybody else the notion that we don't prosecute retail theft is giving you something that is untrue. It is also the truth that we have looked carefully at the data, and the vast majority of these cases are once in a year or one-timers. When it comes to people who keep doing it, not only do we charge them with higher level offenses, I gave you the example of somebody we sent to state prison, and he came out, and guess what? It wasn't all fixed, right? But we're going to try to send him to state prison again. So you and I share the viewpoint that we have to protect small businesses, that we have to have accountability. But let's not live in an imaginary world here. I've been in the courts in Philly for 36 years. If you charge somebody with a misdemeanor and they sit in jail for a bunch of time and the taxpayers pay for it, and then the witnesses don't show up, then you will have what we used to have, which was a 90% loss rate on these cases. We have to try to do things differently when they have failed. And the old approach to this failed miserably. What we are doing here is an approach that, in our view, is in the long-term interest of public safety. The problem that we are having, and perhaps this is another area where you and I agree, The problem that we are having is we need a public health approach to addiction. We need to do what other places have done where they see an 80% turnaround in addiction, but that's not what we do. We've tried to use law enforcement for everything. We tried to use it for mental health and got rid of 85% of the mental health system. We tried to use it for addiction. It fails. We know that. And I'm not saying one size fits all. Maybe some prosecution for some people help them some of the time. But when we look at countries where they've had an 80% improvement, and then we look at the condition of Kensington as compared to how it was in the 1960s, it's only gotten worse by taking a more traditional approach to that. So I want you to know that I share with you 100% the reality that there has to be accountability when it comes to retail theft. My office doesn't turn down these cases at all, and whoever is feeding you that line is being deeply dishonest about what is happening.
So what you're saying is that it's due to the police not charging them. So it's
That's
at their discretion to charge. So what you're saying is they're not charging them.
No, as I said before, there's two major issues here, which is stores used to stop people who stole from them. They used to pay for security guards and stop people. I can't tell stores what to do. If they've bought into the false notion that you can't stop anybody without having a successful lawsuit, I don't know what to say. They might want to get new lawyers, okay? Or they might want to pay for their own security. But these stores also, let's be clear, they're going to need to pay for those witnesses to go to court so that we can actually bring a successful prosecution. So the stores have their position. The police have their position. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. It's not fair to throw them under the bus that they're understaffed. It's not their fault. And that they prioritize.
I wasn't saying that. I get it. I'm just trying to figure out, I'm trying to be unconfrontational because it's in my nature to be confrontational. But I'm still not understanding. My neighborhood's getting worse. You're correct on that. It's getting worse. Something has to give. I don't know what it is, and I need somebody whose head I need to take because I got to deal with constituents who are afraid to leave their homes. I mean, this is like people got a thing where okay, it's Kensington. What are we going to do? Well, we got residents there are tired of what are we going to do? It's Kensington. Something's got to be done. And I'm venting at this point, and I apologize. But I like to get to the bottom of where the disconnect is from whether we're arresting these people, we're charging these people, we're not charging these people. And I get what you're saying, they're sitting in jail and that's no good. But why aren't we charging them and get them into the ROR, to the AMP program and get them into recovery? I guess the disconnect is on the waiting for them to be charged. Is that what it is?
No, sir. And listen, I don't mind your venting at all. I was in Kensington last night. There was a time when I was a private attorney, when about 40+% of my clientele was Spanish speaking, and many of them were from Kensington. So Kensington is not new to me. And I had a good time, actually, sitting next to Councilmember Lozada in Kensington last night. It matters to me very much. So I don't blame you for venting at all. But part of the problem here is we got to deal with the real information. The real information is that Kensington has not received the support it needed for decades, and it has not received that support because it in general has not produced a ton of votes, and it is populated by people who don't have a ton of money. So Chestnut Hill is going to get treated better than Kensington, and that's wrong. And I share your feeling in that regard. But let's talk about what's going to work. Because for the most part, law enforcement in Kensington, and I say this with great respect for everybody who tried hard, has failed for 60 years. There is a reason why Kensington has 28 out of the 57 blocks. Kensington area has 28 of those blocks. There has been
most of them are a 3-block radius from my house. I know. I got the map sitting right here.
I get that. Yep. You and I agree on that. I am all about solutions for Kensington. But you and I also know that we can talk about Walgreens closing. We need to talk a little more broadly about how many opioid prescriptions Walgreens filled in Kensington. And they're being sued for that right now.
I get it. That's another thing.
And I'm part of that lawsuit. So, we have to all try to find a way to work together, but whoever's selling you on the notion, my office does not prosecute retail thefts. That is not true. Whoever is selling you on the notion that I'm the one who has to charge them when the police have the authority to charge them with summaries any minute they want, that's not true. Those cases automatically go to court where we deal them. And whoever's selling you on the notion, or perhaps they're not, maybe I'm misunderstanding, that we cannot put people in treatment on summary charges. Yes, we can. We can, in fact, put them in jail. We can put them in jail up to 90 days, which is a long time to be in jail for stealing a pack of ever-ready batteries. So we do have power there. We're just taking some of the useless steps out of the process.
Mr. District Attorney and Member Harity, I'm going to let some of the other members ask some questions, but Member Harity, I felt your passion about the issue. And what I would suggest is one of the things that we could do as a body, Member Lozada is going to probably schedule a meeting to talk about the Kensington plan that she introduced a resolution on, and a subset of this. And it's not just a Kensington problem. I'm sure my colleague in South Philadelphia, and definitely myself in West Philadelphia, has a retail theft problem where people believe that it is okay to come in and help themselves, literally have recycling baskets and walk right out because some of the owners are afraid to confront them. I have had members of a minority-owned McDonald's tell me that they shut down their dining rooms because at 52nd and Jefferson, there were entities that just took them over. And I know Ken Youngblood up in your area, maybe on Frankfurt, had that same problem. But I'm going to put a pin in that, and I'm going to recognize Member Lozada next, and then Cindy Bass.
Thank you, Mr. DA. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you, Leader Jones. Member Harity, thank you so much for your passion. I share your frustration, and so I get where you're coming from. I think that part of the issue, and this is just a comment, right? Part of the issue is that we need to stop talking in circles. DA Krasner mentioned it earlier. We need to stop pointing fingers at each other, and we need to really come to the table and have an honest conversation about what the heck it is we need to do to change what is happening on the ground every day in Kensington, not just for a specific population of people, but for all of them. We have a responsibility to kids that are growing up in that neighborhood, and we're failing them horribly. And we can have a boatload of anti-violence programs, but we are doing absolutely nothing, and they will serve us for nothing if we don't figure out what we need to do to fix the quality of life in Kensington right now. And that was just a comment. I'd also like to follow up on a comment that Lamar made, and he said something about canvassing different neighborhoods. I'd like to know, and working with several different schools, I'd like to know which one of those, what schools were they, if there were any in the 7th Council District, and what were the results of that survey.
Okay, let me bring them up.
Thank you.
If you just give me a few moments, Councilmember Lozada, I can go get our report that we have, but I know we're at about 2,400 businesses.
G. Lamar, state your name again.
Yes, no problem. Councilmember Jones, G. Lamar Stewart. So I can tell you how many businesses here momentarily that we've canvassed since over the last 2 years in Kensington. As far as schools that we're at in Kensington, Mastbaum is our one of our schools that's in your district. We previously was in Juniata Park Academy as well, but as of right now, Mastbaum is the one school that we're in, and consistently in the 7th District.
Thank you so much. If you could share with me the results of that survey, as well as the businesses that you canvassed, and if you could share the survey with me, I'd like to know what were the questions we were asking them, and what were their responses, as well as what was the purpose of the survey, and how are we going to use the survey moving forward to better improve services, business growth, and quality of life along those corridors. Because as you know, walking along the Kensington corridor, they're having a really difficult time being able to survive as a result of 1,000 people living on their streets or in front of their businesses. And so I'd like to know what questions you all were asking them, what was the purpose, and how was their response?
Certainly. In short, I can tell you, Councilmember, as the chief community advocate in this space, I find my purpose here to be a voice for the community and those who are on the ground at the senior leadership table. So more often than not, I'm using that information to keep the DA and his senior leadership informed as to what the people closest to the ground and closest to the trauma are saying each and every day. I will share with you our entire business canvassing report from the East Division community as a whole. Generally, what we're asking them for is for, of course, name, their title in the store, and then any information around concerns that they may have from a public safety perspective. And so those notes are taken in that on that document, and we continue to update that report every time we go out. You have that within the next 20 minutes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Does that take care of you for this round, Member Lozada?
Yes, thank you, sir.
All right, the chair will now recognize Member Cindy Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. District Attorney.
Good afternoon, council member.
So I just wanted to, I really wasn't going to ask any questions, but I have to admit I'm quite troubled by what I just heard in the conversation with Councilman Harity, and what a few things that I picked up, here and there. I haven't been here for the whole hearing because I was at the funeral for the 15-year-old who was gunned down on his way to school last week. And Councilman Jones, thank you so much for providing citation from us and from council. I appreciate that. But it just bothered me, and I have to say, as I heard the councilman ask questions about what is happening, particularly, let's use Center City for example, around stores closing, around retail theft that seems to go unprosecuted. And it seemed as if, they stopped hiring security guards, and they have to pay for people to come down and testify, or, whatever that expense is, and, on and on and on it went. And it doesn't really seem as if the district attorney's office seems to feel like any level of responsibility for what is happening in our city around retail theft. And the fact that if you feel, well, let me ask you a question. Do you think everything's okay? Do you think that, stores leaving and closing and saying that they're leaving, the reason that they're giving for leaving is that the amount of retail theft happening in the city of Philadelphia makes it impossible for them to do business? So do you think that they're basically making that up, or is that just not the case? Or do you think that you disagree completely with that, or do you think that there is some merit to what it is that they're saying?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the work that you did, along with Council Member Gilmore Richardson, and along with Kendra Brooks, in relation to the situation with the 15-year-old. We actually spoke about that, and I appreciate your attending that funeral, which is where G. Lamar Stewart, as I'm sure you know, was as well. So thank you. You used the phrase "seems to go unprosecuted." We have actually discussed this in some detail. Every single retail theft case where police are involved is charged, so long as there is probable cause, and that's 99.99%, because the police, when they are there, do a good job. I don't think it does any good to play some kind of a blame game with a complex situation, and so I'm not going to do that.
Mr. District Attorney, and I don't want to blame anyone. I don't want to blame you, but I want to get down to the answers. And I guess what I'm asking is, and I'm not saying that you're blaming anyone, but what I am saying is, and this has, I've noticed this as a trend in some of the conversations that we've had about the problems that we all see when we go out into the neighborhoods, and the concerns and the issues that people bring to us. And when we bring them to different, parts of the administration, the response we get back is, it's kind of like, almost like, well, we're doing all we can do. We're doing the best we can do. Well, you know what, doggone it, our best isn't good enough. The city's best isn't good enough. What we're providing isn't good enough. The idea that, you know, if I was in your shoes, the idea that people are saying that they're closing because the district attorney's office is not prosecuting would bother me. It would bother me. And I don't think that it really bothers you. I mean, tell me, does it? Does it mean anything? And if it does, then what's the action behind making sure that we address it? I'm just so frustrated. Like I said, I was at a funeral with a whole bunch of kids who were on spring break at a classmate's funeral. And that's not what spring break is supposed to be about for a bunch of high school students. This is not what it's supposed to be. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Mr. District Attorney.
Well, I'd be happy to answer your question if you would like. So
yes, please.
The notion that things that go prosecuted, quote, seem to go unprosecuted, unquote, is a political narrative. That's the fact. The reality is that for every summary offense that is charged by police, that is retail theft, for every misdemeanor or felony offense that is charged by this office that is retail theft, we prosecute those cases, and we prosecute them in a variety of ways. But we are a part of a larger ecosystem. Stores have to call police. Police have to be able to respond, and we know that they have serious staffing issues. And then when police respond, they unilaterally can write a ticket that begins a prosecution for the summary criminal offense of retail theft that can put somebody in jail for 90 days. And it can also put them in treatment, and it can also put them in other situations to deal with it. So I'm bothered by two things. I'm always bothered by anything that is difficult for business, especially small business, in a city that needs to lift up its small business owners, not tax them to death, not make it hard for them to do anything administratively. That bothers me. But it also bothers me when there's a narrative out there that is political and is false. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but there are people in this city who have made a point of a false narrative in order to obscure the truth.
But Mr. District Attorney, wouldn't you agree that if the narrative is false, then there needs to be action behind it to show that this is what, like tell me what we're doing to address that wrong narrative, that incorrect narrative? What is the district attorney's office doing to correct that? Because I'm just not seeing it. And, it seems as if, there was a time when stores in Center City and elsewhere, had security guards. And there was a time when retail theft was prosecuted and was never an excuse to close a store. They just went out of business. But now, why is it all of a sudden that now we're saying they're not being prosecuted? And so all of these businesses are conspiring to say the same thing. That doesn't jive with me. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, obviously this is an issue that we have had an opportunity to address today at length and repeatedly, but I will be happy to repeat some of that. I can't tell you why there is that particular perception, but I also can't tell you why there's a perception that every time a Democrat wins an election, it was stolen, or that there are machines that control the weather. There are some people who buy into false narratives. There are other people whose interests are served by false narratives. The reality is that if you look, for example, at the closing of a couple of Wawas in Center City, Philadelphia, if you look at that, and those are actually close to my office and I see them all the time, what you will find out, not that they closed the ones where there were the highest reporting of crimes. The Inquirer looked at this thoroughly. They closed ones that were not the most profitable, and they kept open ones, including ones that have had far higher levels of crimes reported. So it is not as simple as what someone in an election season might want to turn into a soundbite. The fact is that stores have always, in my 36 years as an attorney, they've always had security guards that would stop people. They might not show up for court, and that's why 90% of those cases were lost back in the old days, but they had security guards who would stop people. I'm not going to pretend that I know why some of them don't have security guards, or why some of them would rather take videos of people leaving than stop them. But that's step one. And then step two is that you need to have our hardworking members of the PPD in a position where they have enough staffing so that they're not only prioritizing the rapes, the murders, the arsons, but they're able to respond to something that is less serious than that, but obviously serious to all of us, which is retail theft. I mean, we can talk all day long about how People
Yeah.
feel that they don't have a response, but if the reality is that PPD doesn't have the personnel it's
Let's
it
take
needs,
PPD out of it. Let's take
should
PPD
then
out
we
of it.
blame them for that.
Because, yeah, let's take the police department out of it, because you know, even when a case comes forward, you know, the word on the street is that, you know, it's not going anywhere. And I want to bring to your attention, really to everyone's attention, a very specific case. And Mr. President, I know that the bell has rung and my time is up. So I just really want to say something very briefly, which is that, Mr. District Attorney, you and I have had extensive conversations about Kymere Carlton, who was a young man who was 27-year-old, a father of three, former city council staffer in my office, son of former streets commissioner and now deputy city commissioner, deputy mayor Donald Carlton here in the city of Philadelphia, who was shot by someone at a bar. We asked for at least, because the circumstances we understand are a little bit murky, but we asked at least the consideration of a trial of at least a manslaughter charge. And I know that you can't go into the entire amount of detail right now around not charging the person who shot him with manslaughter, you know, and I know that there are different degrees of manslaughter that you could have looked at. But to me, it feels as if there is not the level of prosecution and support that the citizens of Philadelphia need coming out of your office. And so I know you have great, hardworking men and women in the DA's office, but they all fall under your leadership, Mr. DA. And we all need your leadership to help guide us, lead us through what is really an unprecedented time here in the city of Philadelphia when it comes to crime and criminal activity and a sense of lawlessness and the frustration that we all feel. Like I said, I shouldn't have had to be at a funeral for a 15-year-old who was buried today. Like, it's over for him. But what are we going to do to ensure that this doesn't continue to happen? And you know, I know I'm just ranting a little bit, but Mr. President, I apologize. I'm just a little bit frustrated.
Well, certainly I can understand anyone's frustration when we deal with the level of gun violence that we're seeing. It frustrates me all the time. It concerns me. I have met, as you know, with the father of the individual who was killed there on more than one occasion. My office has communicated with him repeatedly. We invited you to some of those meetings. You attended one, if I recall correctly.
That is correct, and I sent staff as well.
And as you know, the story is a little more complex.
And don't think I didn't pick up that little shade right there. Okay, don't think that got by me, because
I think it's important for everybody to know.
Yeah, you know, don't think that little bit of shade you tried to just throw in there. I attended one. I attended more than one meeting, first of all. And you know that I've been relentlessly calling, texting, and I'd be happy to publish my emails and text to you, asking you to prosecute, asking you to do something to ensure there was justice for this family who buried their 27-year-old son, straight A student, honor roll student, graduated college, doing all the things he was supposed to do, father of three, forever buried now. And so, Mr. District Attorney, we're asking still today, if you ever intend to prosecute, or at least let a jury decide if there's going to be any charges for this person who shot Kymere Carlton.
Well,
and there's no response at all. There's no response half the time from your office, and the other time it's making excuses. So I'm just, you know, I'm just done with it. I'm just done. But we look forward to eventually hearing something from you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Let's dial it down.
Yeah, no.
You know, you don't want an answer right now?
Let's dial it down a little bit. It's good to have interaction, but no, you can respond.
Well, it's an election season.
Look, I'm gonna say this. You know, I'm like
election season has nothing to do with Kymere Carlton, who was killed last March of 2022. Like, we're still waiting, and there's a lot of families that are still waiting for that prosecution to happen, Mr. District Attorney, election season or not.
Councilmember,
so
did you want to what was in this young man's hand and where he was going and whether he had fired anything at the time when he was shot? Did you want to inform them of that, or just suggest it was something in a bar?
Mr. District Attorney, you got the facts of the case. You put it all out there. Put it all out there and let people decide and see what they think. If it should go to trial. That's what we're asking.
Time out, y'all. All right, we're not going to do this on this platform. I actually went to a press conference at the site 2 weeks ago with the people. I understand there's a lot of passion around the bar. The incident, the mother was there, the whole 9 yards. That hopefully that will be resolved. We're not going to resolve it today. But I do want to say that, and you know, Mr. DA, you and I have had, you know, differences of viewpoint, never to the level, you know, where we were having public discourse. But members are, and you know about frustration. I mean, the frustration level in this council, particularly when we're at the front line, you know, we're out there every day. We hear it, we hear it, we hear it, we hear it. I listen to Councilman Harity, and Councilman Harity, don't ever apologize for being passionate about your neighborhood. I get it. I have my office in a little strip mall on Sedgley and Ridge, and that Dollar General, every other day, somebody's running out of the stores after stealing something out of the Dollar General, and guess what? They're leaving, right? Down the corner. We had that was an AutoZone, I think it was, and the folks were like stealing out of there. Guess what? They're leaving, and it is in these economically depressed communities where this kind of stuff happens. So I get it. So now we're not going to have a dollar store. We're not going to be able to buy goods and services. That's real, right? I understand this issue with respect to charging on the prosecution side. These people are doing what they're doing primarily because the underlying issue is poverty, right? They didn't have the proper education, they have a good job, so they wouldn't have to steal, right? But it is affecting and impacting the quality of life. Earlier, Councilman Johnson talked about a narrative when I think it was suggested that we or the people need to contact the police or whatever, as opposed to the law enforcement entities working together to figure out a solution. We got to figure this out, and that means all of us. So please don't think that the level of passion and take it personally. And you're tough, thick skin. You've been getting it in the side and the neck for a long time. This is what we hear. We're hearing it now more than ever because of, you know, the season that we're in. So we gotta, and I appreciate the fact that we have these meetings on a consistent basis, something that you offer, and I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, because of the communities that it's impacting, this retail theft, which is real in our neighborhoods, because the bottom line is, we talked about, and I want to thank Councilman Johnson for getting the Office of Victims Advocate. These neighborhoods are victims, right? Maybe we need to amend it to include the residents who now don't have goods and services because people say, I'm out, right? I'm out. And I'm looking at my bottom line. I got a very minimal level of profit. And if I'm losing money because people are with retail theft, they call it shrinkage, right? In some places, I got to go. So I just want everybody to understand this issue is real. It is not at the level of gun violence and homicide, but when you take away services in a neighborhood, you cause people to leave that neighborhood, and then that neighborhood starts to decline because people are leaving. So it's a real deal. We really need to have some level of accountability because somebody steals, you know, 2, 3, 4 times. You can't just simply slap them on the hand and talk about a cartel or something or fencing. These people are just taking stuff because they can. I mean, and they need it, they can. And at the end of the day, there has to be some level of accountability. What that level is, that's a challenge that you have to deal with on a daily basis to have the appropriate balance. But we have to deal with the fact that people making decisions to leave our communities, and you'll see it reflected in the most recent census. So that's what you're hearing today. And I know you get it. You're out there a lot. You know, it's not like you've lost touch with the neighborhoods. You do your meetings, but we got to figure this out. You know, it's not just homicides. It's things beyond the homicides and the shootings. It's all the things that contribute to the demise of a community. And I understand why we need to figure this out. So I just wanted to say that as I'm listening to this back and forth. Councilman Harity, did you have additional questions? I got an old. You good?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
You good?
Thank you.
Everyone good? Mr. D,
CP, I'm sorry, I couldn't get into the CP. I asked for acknowledgement. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson, I'm sorry.
Yes, I apologize. I'm sorry, I was trying to get into the chat and I couldn't get into the chat fast enough, but I just wanted to state on a day like today, recognizing what my colleague had to deal with in attending the funeral of the young man who graduated from, who was a student of Grants, which is a school that my mother graduated from. I just wanted to stand in support of her today and what she had to go through in her district, and just state for the record that it is important for all of us to be responsible for what is happening in our city, and that no one can absolve themselves of the responsibility, which includes being a true partner in collaboration and ensuring that we can make a difference on these issues. So I just wanted to put that on the record, because I do think that it's inappropriate for some of the things that were said to have been said on this meeting today, and I do not want to hear that again. Thank you, Council President.
We're better than the good old days when they actually used to have physical fights, but every now and then we do get a little testy, and it's understandable given the challenges that we face, and we're all trying to better our communities and our city, the city that we all love and have chosen to be in public service, something that a lot of people aren't willing to do. So we will hopefully continue our debate. If there are no additional questions for the district attorney, I want to thank you. There will be obviously some follow-up. So D, I just do want to, on the retail theft issue, I may need some clarity, because we are going to be, I know I am, and I'm sure some other members, about this whole issue of who's ultimately responsible, the police in terms of charging versus the DA, versus making sure that a retail store, which I know that Dollar General called the police multiple times. They came down to my office and reporting it to us, right? I'm like, all we can do is forward it. If there's a way that a retail operator, particularly a small business, knows that I can reach out, report this theft, right, and it can rise to the level that it should be as it relates to holding somebody accountable. So I do want to follow up with you and your staff, whoever is responsible for that. The other thing I'd like to do, in terms of what we do as a council, the issue around the nighttime ability, off-hour ability to get a warrant. A police officer shouldn't have to wait 6, 7, 8 hours to get a warrant because it's the middle of the night. So if you can please follow up with us on that to tell us how we can get the parties together, be it the judicial system or whatever, as we move towards these funding sources. As you say, as eConsult is probably going to tell you when they report, which we use too, but we kind of know about this firsthand. If the money needs to be spent in a way that's most effective and efficient, we need to know that. So that would be helpful also if we can get a little more clarity on that. All right.
Council President, can I just make an additional request?
Sure.
I know there was a lot of conversation back and forth about what the retail businesses had to do, as well as what PPD has to do in order to change some of what is happening as it relates to retail theft. But I'd like to also, we were not able to get a complete response this afternoon or this morning about what the DA is actually doing, right? What is your office, aside from what everybody else is not doing, what is your office doing to help address the retail theft issue across the city? And I think that if we get that later on, all of this other stuff that happened, if we get it separate, it might be easier for us to kind of move on to the next step and figure out how we can then work collaboratively to bring real change.
First of all, I want to thank council not only for their questions, but for their interest in what we have to say. As I said earlier, I'm more than happy to do a special session, which I think has perhaps been suggested by you, Councilmember Lasada and Councilmember Squilla, because it's pretty clear to me there's still a lack of clarity on some of this. And I totally agree with you that this has to be a collaborative effort across the board, including doing new things, such as going after organized retail theft, which is part of our budget request. So I hope in all of this, you will not lose sight of the fact that we're trying to do more and do it bigger in ways that we think will have a real impact when it comes to retail theft.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. District Attorney and your team.
Thank you.
Council members. With that, we will tee up our next witness, Sheriff's Department. And Sheriff Rochelle Bilal.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sheriff. How are you?
Good afternoon, Council President Clark. Let me first say thank you for your long-term service to the city of Philadelphia. You will be missed, and I'll be at the party. I had to add that.
Thank you for our friendship. Our friendship that goes way beyond particular offices. Yeah.
Yes. Way beyond.
You can proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, President Clark and members of City Council. I'm Rochelle Bilal, Sheriff of Philadelphia City and County. Joining me today are Tyreek L. Shabazz, Esquire, Undersheriff, that comes with 36 years of experience. Erica C. Davenport, my Chief of Staff, comes with 20 plus years of administrative in her position. Patrick Lee, my Chief Financial Officer, comes with 29 years of experience in the financial area. Plus, Craig Martin, our Chief Budget Officer, comes with 20 plus years in the financial world of experience. I will be providing testimony on the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office Fiscal Year 2024 operating budget. Our operating budget is the body of the office, which gives life to the arms of our sworn personnel and civilian staff to perform their daily duties. The accomplishment of our office during fiscal year 2023 were diverse in its assignments and are conducted at the state and federal level. These assignments allow our office to actively assist with investigations to arrest individuals included in misdemeanors and felony crime, which is provided in slide 4 of our PowerPoint presentation. However, our office is consistently underfunded, and this jeopardizes the lives and safety of our sworn and civilian personnel, which includes the judicial staff, citizens of the city, and our beloved council members. An underfunded budget further restricts the support capabilities of our civilian staff regarding the acquisition of services, supplies, equipment needed for our sworn personnel. The following factors also impact our operations. Some of our installations operate at a 63% or less of their required sworn personnel levels. Attrition due to retirement, resignations due to low pay, lack of competitive benefits, and this is based on the officers' exit interviews. Lack of respect of their classification, sworn personnel being listed under codes for corrections, security, and other generic civil service designations, which has an impact on safety and officers' morale. Although we have made some strides with the reclassification of the sworn personnel, their salary remains low in comparison to other law enforcement agencies. As the arm of the court for the 1st Judicial District, our office can ill afford to stranglehold on our operating budget, and several of my commanders will speak of the impact of the restricted level of funding on their law enforcement operations. Let me introduce those that will speak in testimony after me. Captain William Hines, Bike Unit and K-9 Unit Captain. Captain Nicole J. Nobles, Warrant Unit. Captain Sean Thornton, Civil Unit. Upon completion of their testimonies, I will proceed with the rest of our presentation and conclude with responding to questions from City Council members. Thank you. Captain Hines.
Good afternoon, Council people. As commander of the Biking K-9 unit, I quickly would like to present some yearly stats from year 2022. Our areas of responsibility for the Bike and K-9 unit cover mainly the judicial buildings and the corridors that correspond to them. The Stout Center, Family Court, Widener Court, City Hall, MSB, Probation Building at 714 Arch, and Traffic Court. While we do not patrol in the traditional fashion, our numbers would say something completely opposite. Our total activity reports from our bike unit and K-9 for the year 2022 is 2,275. That breaks down as such. 31 citations were issued for everything from disorderly conduct to vandalism. 499 disturbances were responded to. These would include everything from protests to incidents in the surrounding areas reported as we respond also to police radio. There were 292 PFA escorts, ensuring that all court orders are not violated while plaintiffs and defendants are attending their respective court hearings. Our bike unit and K-9 officers have also issued 1,339 parking violations in the areas surrounding and adjacent to court properties. We have personally responded to and notified fire rescue for 63 documented medical emergencies. And while dealing with the mental health issues of our citizens on a daily basis, we have had 16 people committed for mental health evaluations to ensure that they would do no harm to anyone, including themselves. Our unit also has 19 arrests, some higher profile, the highest profile being the one of the gentleman sitting on his car outside City Hall. That man was arrested with no injuries to any civilians, any staff, or even himself. Our K-9 unit has completed over 800 explosive and narcotic searches in 2022, while also doing routine searches of all court properties, one having a 3-story garage underneath it. Our K-9 has been utilized or loaned out to different agencies with much success. Philadelphia Police, Attorney General's Office, the DEA, Homeland Security, and the Postal Inspectors, as well as others, leading to the confiscation of at least 34 illegal firearms by our Sheriff K-9. Our bike and K-9 units have worked partners with all other law enforcement agencies and will continue to do so with integrity and honor. All these numbers come from a unit comprised of between 8 and 10 bike officers and 3 K-9s. Thank you.
Captain Nicole Nobles from the Warrant Unit.
Good afternoon, City Council.
You gotta speak up, Nobles.
Good afternoon, City Council. My unit, we are a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation with a vast number of responsibilities. We execute numerous types of warrants: bench warrants, probation warrants, arrest warrants, and judicial body warrants issued for house arrest violations, just to name a few. These warrants include charges ranging from narcotics possession to firearms violations and homicide. In addition, the Sheriff's Warrant Unit is responsible for the execution of all civil warrants such as scofflaw and domestic relation warrants. We also travel the surrounding counties rearresting offenders who are arrested on local warrants 24/7 days a week. In addition to the warrant services, we execute custody orders, process and serve all income and protection from abuse orders from Philadelphia, out of county and out of state PFAs, including those that require evictions and surrendering weapons. We support our civil enforcement unit on evictions, as well as our tactical response team, especially during civil unrest. Other responsibilities include judicial dignitary protection, building security, and in-house arrest for the Philadelphia Probation and Parole Building. At total capacity, our unit is made up of 8 supervisors and 44 deputies in 3 shifts. Currently, we have 6 supervisors and 22 deputies split among 3 shifts, with the majority being on day work. Even through the staffing challenges, the Philadelphia Sheriff Warrant Unit has remained effective in executing our responsibilities by increasing the workload on the deputies, increasing overtime, and increasing support from other units in the Sheriff's Office. Under Sheriff Bilau's administration, we have deputies assigned to the Office of Attorney General's Bureau of Narcotics, FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, and the Mayor's Office of Violence Prevention Task Force. This has allowed us to build strong relationships with our fellow law enforcement partners on all levels, state, local, and federal. Those partners have allowed us to ensure resources, information, and manpower as we strive towards the same goal of getting guns, drugs, and fugitives off the street. For 2022, the Philadelphia Sheriff's Warrant Unit has recovered 83 weapons and over 1.1 million in narcotics from the Warrant Unit. Our equipment. Under Sheriff Bilal, we have received upgrades in equipment such as ballistic shields for warrant service, new ballistic vests for all deputies, desktop computers, and access to software such as Clear. However, one of our biggest hardships happens to be essential to our unit productivity, and that is vehicles. The Sheriff Warrant Unit hasn't received a new vehicle since 2017. Since 2017, the Philadelphia Sheriff Fugitive Unit has served over 28,902 warrants. That number doesn't account for surveillance done on each case. That number doesn't include the serving of protection and abuse orders, in which we received over 5,000 just for 2022. It doesn't include the custody orders in which we transport children, judicial security details. The Sheriff's Fugitive Warrant Unit is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week unit with 3 different shifts. Having only 4 vehicles, we are unable to rotate to avoid excess wear and tear on them. Our vehicles never get a break, which has played a large role in why we have 3 of our 4 vehicles are flagged for disposal by fleet management. Rain, sleet, or snow, these are the vehicles that we must rely on to get the job done. And after years of numerous mechanical issues for excessive use, they are simply not reliable.
Next, Captain Sean Thornton, Civil Unit.
Good afternoon, council members. As the commander of Civil Enforcement Unit, our duties include litter possessions, which is evictions, litter executions, which is serving banks, enforcing license and inspection court orders, posting handbills, serving protection from abuse orders, injunctions, and serving service of complaints. Currently, we have as personnel 1 captain, 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 12 sheriff detectives. Evictions. During the eviction process, our first encounter with the occupant is to either post or serve a 21-day notice to vacate the property. The notice will have all the pertinent information about the eviction, including contact information from our office. After the 21 days, we will schedule an eviction, which is typically 2 to 3 weeks later. On eviction day, we ensure that the transfer of property is done within a safe manner. As a neutral party, we ensure that the occupant is treated with the same respect as the plaintiff who filed it. For 2022, we executed 537 evictions. Currently this year, at the end of March, we executed 137 evictions. Protection from abuse orders. To effectively serve the PFA orders in the city of Philadelphia, a memorandum of understanding was entered and signed between the sheriff and the commissioner of the police department. Under the memorandum, it is written that the sheriff office is the primary authority responsible for serving the PFAs. We make several attempts to serve the PFAs and do our due diligence to retrieve any weapons from defendants that have them. There is constant communication with the police department by way of a dedicated email to stay abreast of all known defendants who are in possession of firearms and have yet to surrender them. According to Act 79, states that our unit is responsible for monitoring the defendants of a PFA who must relinquish their firearms after 24 hours of being issued a PFA. After the 24 hours, we'll go to the resident's home, other defendants, to retrieve the weapons if they have them. Additionally, our office, along with other stakeholders who are involved with serving, enforcing, and Prosecuting Act 79 meet monthly to discuss ways to improve our responsibilities. These stakeholders include the Philadelphia Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, the family court personnel where the PFAs are generated, and the Office of Health and Human Services. Currently, in 2023, we received 1,015 PFAs, and we attempted to relinquish 832 firearms. In 2022, we received 3,937 PFAs and attempted to relinquish firearms 3,190. The last thing I want to point out that we also serve and enforce election court orders. During the primary election in May and the general election in November, our units serve and enforce all election court orders that are generated in election court. We have a deputy in the courtroom to receive the orders, while our detectives are stationed in various parts of the city to enforce the order where necessary. Just a quick side note, as we talked about the Warren unit and we talked about the bike unit and the civil detective unit, we were all enforcement, we had enforcement for that encampment that happened at 40th and Market last summer. We were responsible for that, taking down that encampment. We did so in a professional manner with 0 incidents. Just a quick note on equipment. We serve our PFAs, as I noted, that the 3,937 that we served last year, our detectives are using their personal vehicles. We would like to see have some vehicles be able to serve these. It's a high risk for our detectives out there serving these PFAs. And our staffing levels, as I mentioned, 1 captain, 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 12 detectives. I would like to see that number increase to approximately 30 detectives and maybe 3 or 4 supervisors. Thank you.
So that we can get the elephant out of the room in this, I want to introduce my undersheriff, Tyreek El Shabazz, to discuss an issue.
First of all, good afternoon, Council President Clark, Council members, and Sheriff Rochelle Bilal. We all know that we are in a gun epidemic crisis. And because we are in that crisis, we felt it was best to, as the sheriff said, get the elephant out of the room. So we want to deal first with the myth or misinformation that deals with a former deputy by the name of Samir Ahmed. It's said and it is rumored that Samir Ahmed was receiving guns or getting guns from the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office Armory and taking those weapons and selling them. Some of those perpetuated lies were not outside of the office, only some of it was inside of the office. So that we can have a couple of facts that are actually clear. No one after this particular setting should have any questions as to whether or not any weapon that that Samir is alleged to have sold and been in possession of came or was stolen or was ever in the possession of the sheriff's office. First of all, he was assigned to the family court unit, which is outside the purview of where our armory is. The armory is in 100 South Broad Street. That's the first thing. Secondly, he never had access to any weapons that were in the custody of the sheriff's office at any time during his stay. Third, I forgot, and I should have said first, he was a former deputy at the time in which he was arrested. Any weapon that was associated with the murder, the unfortunate murder of this young man, a young man, and when I say young man, everybody is familiar with what I'm talking about, had nothing whatsoever to do with a weapon that was taken from the sheriff's office. In fact, the evidence is going to show, and we know this for sure, that the serial number on all those guns retrieved, and including the weapons that was used during the course of the shooting, never touched the base of the sheriff's office, the sheriff's armory, or any of our sheriff's deputies, with the exception of the former deputy allegation is. With that being said, I want to move to, again, gun crisis and the audit report that people have been talking about that I might have led to this discussion about whether or not guns were sold or stolen from the sheriff's office. That audit report began in 2019. Let me say that again, 2019, early 2019. And it was based upon the request of somebody that was in the sheriff's office to have the armory that has been in a Deplorable condition, and you have an opportunity to see it when you see the slides. Deplorable condition under somebody else's administration for years. Sheriff Bilal didn't take office until January 6th of 2020. On January 7th of 2020, the controller came into the sheriff's office to begin the audit of the armory. So the pictures that you're going to see are pictures that were taken January 7th, 2020, one day in for Sheriff Bilal. The report, however, seems to infer that this condition was based upon the administration of Sheriff Bilal. It is important to know that when you see these slides, you're going to notice that there were guns and boxes that were lying all over the place. You had guns that were in bags. And in fact, the receipt, in order to find that gun, would read, gun in right bag next to the locker inside a blue box. That was the mechanism in which the gun unit, or I should say the armory, was trying to conduct business. In fact, I have to give credit to Deputy Sharmatu. Deputy Sharmatu is the armor for our armory. She was in fact instrumental in trying to institute an audit, the audit that the controller did in January of 2020. In that report, the controller indicated that they found, based on the cooperation and working with Sharmatu, the deputy, 101 guns missing, non-duty guns. But the report says they were duty guns. They were non-duty guns. How do we know they were non-duty guns? These guns that they're referring to that were missing, the ones that we didn't find, incidentally, the ones that we didn't find were registered in October the 13th of 1982. There were no Glocks in the sheriff's office or anyone else in 1982. The Glocks did not become effective in law enforcement in Philadelphia, at least with respect to the sheriff's office, until 2002, the first time they were. So there were no Glocks. So what we do know, if any guns were missing, there weren't Glocks. Additionally, of those 101 guns that were missing, they were in the possession of the sheriff's office during, as we will see, from 1970, the 80s, and the 90s. Again, no Glocks existed during that time. 57 of them were found when the armory was finally cleaned and we began to take an inventory under the guidance of Deputy Sharmatu and under the instructions of Sheriff Bilal. 23 of those 57 were found. An additional 23 that were found, we found that they were registered to retirees, retired deputies of the Philadelphia Sheriff's Office. There used to be a time where other sheriffs allowed retired deputies to take their duty weapon with them. If they took their duty weapon with them, sometimes it was registered to them and sometimes the weapon was taken and it wasn't registered. We were able to find during the course of that audit that 23 of those guns were found. So far, we have 80 guns that were retrieved. Remember, 101 guns missing. And if you read the report, it acts like it's 101 guns out there. But now we have 80 guns that were retrieved. We found that 21 guns had no information about their whereabouts at all. Now, it's important to know that even though they didn't have any information about their whereabouts, we were able to find some information. What we were able to discover is that those guns that were missing, in other words, we couldn't physically find the guns, those guns that were missing were first, revolvers. Second, there were guns that were registered, again, on the 13th of October, 1982. There were 5 long guns additional to that, and there was 1 revolver where we had a serial number, but we didn't have the card or information about that, and we believed it was missing. If you add that together, it gives you an understanding about how many guns were mislabeled, how records were poorly kept, all prior to Sheriff Bilal entering this office. It's important to note that October 13th, 1982 is an important date because it was based on our records. There were guns that were either traded or guns that were destroyed. These guns that were missing were guns from 82, the same type of guns that were destroyed or traded. There are no records, so we don't know if they were destroyed or traded. That's why the guns are reported missing. The caveat here is just simply this. For a long time, in order for sheriffs to have any weapons, those weapons were obtained from the court by court order. What I mean is that there was something called the Star Rule 700. At the end of a criminal case, or when there was a PFA and as a year had passed and there were extra guns, the court could then order that that particular weapon, rather than be destroyed, because oftentimes they're taken and destroyed, rather than be destroyed, that gun be assigned as a duty weapon for the sheriff's department. So anyone that's been around a little like, as long as I've been around, you will know that when we were in City Hall, you would find sheriffs with all different kind of guns posted. That's because there were different guns that were confiscated. And those guns, in terms of those that were collected, were often up-traded. Glocks only came into existence in 2002. The only ones that were in existence prior to 2002, maybe around 2000, 2001, were sheriffs that had their own private Glock. And then they had to sign it over as a duty weapon for the sheriff's office. The armory that you're going to see is different than the armory that was when Sheriff Bilal took on. Since that time, Sheriff Bilal, under the tutelage of, I have to give it again to Deputy Sharmatu, we installed alarms and cameras in the armory. We allowed all weapons to be entered into what was an armory system that at that point was supposed to be managed by a computer system known as Tellusoft. Tellusoft allowed us, or led us to believe, or led somebody to believe, that if in fact we put all of our armor, all of our weapons into a particular computer program, they would be able to allow us to see it, to move it around, to evidence it, to tag it, and to know the location of those guns. The unfortunate part about it is they were getting paid and they never completed the job. As a result of that, we had to get rid of Tellusoft. Since that time, we are doing what is called our own scanning. We're doing our own reports, our own tagging, our own zipping, our own quarterly audits, all because Sheriff Bilal has finally got us what is called the Beast. The Beast is a computer system that not only PPD uses, but most law enforcement uses. It allows us to plug in the information into the computer, track the gun, scan the gun, put it in a central location, be able to detect where that location is by a scan on computer, audit the report, hand out information for PFAs. When it comes to opportunities to return the gun, the Beast will allow us to push a button to scan it and print out automatically all of the information to release it, in addition to property receipts. To assist the court, to assist the Beast program, we have the quartermaster, and I see Councilman Clark, so I think I'm going a little long, so I want to end it here.
Wrap it up.
Well, quartermaster will allow us to maintain chain of custody. These are particular things that are important so that the situation that existed with the lost guns or the missing guns, never happens again. I'm going to stop there because I do have a little bit more, but people are breathing at me.
Yeah, we're going to leave us time for questions, but we still have the first judicial district to come on after you all. Okay. Thanks a lot. Sheriff, thank you, and thank you for your logistical support for City Council and the things that we do over here. We appreciate you. And thank you for all you do out in the neighborhood above and beyond your traditional roles. Thank you for being out in neighborhoods, hosting events, and doing all the other good things you do. I want to ask you a question. I guess it could be the other elephant in the room. This recent event, I know that some members want to do some follow-up work on this. This incident that happened actually over in my council district last week, a privately contracted agent got into a deadly altercation with a resident that was being evicted. And I understand that I was not surprised that they actually had such a thing. But in other municipalities, the sheriff office actually handles evictions of tenants. And I actually thought that was the case here in the city of Philadelphia. What's your perspective on that in terms of the sheriff's office providing that service as opposed to a privately contracted entity? Not suggesting that anything's wrong, it will the role will play itself out. But most people think that this type of activity is usually done with some sort of government entity.
Basically, I found that out when I got here. Like you found that out when it became a media story. I thought it was the sheriff's office that did all of those type of things. Matter of fact, they are the landlord-tenant, I call them people because officers are sworn. So I call them landlord-tenant people that are the ones that do the landlord-tenant disputes. And so therefore, our officers are sworn personnel that are trained differently. And on the most sheriff department, those are the ones that do it. I don't know why that exists. I don't know how it came about. I'm still researching that because immediately they thought it was the deputy sheriffs from this sheriff office. And they was about to run a whole big story on that one. But come to find out that it wasn't us, so they had to back off on that story. So I think it should have been sheriff's office, but that's a question you may have to ask the FJD as to how that came about. I know previously there was a warrant unit that was under FJD, but because they wasn't trained and sworn personnel, that the sheriff office had to bring them over to be deputy sheriffs, and therefore they had to go get training in order to do what they did. In this office, we have arrested a couple of those that went out and said that they were sheriffs when they wasn't. And they were arrested because they were impersonating law enforcement personnel. So I don't know how that came about. That's probably a question for them.
Is that
we don't
something?
have a problem with assuming it, but
yeah.
That would be worked out.
Yeah. So it was my belief, that sheriffs were the entity that did all the evictions. I mean, for the longest, and I've been in government for 1,000 years, right? Is there any role that you all play in evictions at all? Any type of eviction? All right.
We don't do municipal court evictions. And I'll let Captain Thornton tell you the evictions that we do and why.
Good afternoon again, council members. Just to piggyback on what the sheriff is saying, FJD hire their own quote unquote enforcers to do their job. Now, here's the thing. If we get a landlord tenant eviction, yeah, we will execute on it. We can execute it. We had executed on it. Excuse me. Of the 500 plus evictions that we've done last year, 30 of them were landlord tenant evictions. So we have done them in the past. That's just the plaintiff deciding to use us, a legit law enforcement agency who's competent and professional to do the job and train, or use a landlord tenant their enforcers and however they decide to do. But that's totally up to them. I don't know their practices, their operations, or what they do. I can only speak on what we do, what we have been doing.
Okay.
So the CP warrants?
Yes.
The difference between CP and
CP is generated in City Hall, Common Pleas Court. Landlord tenant would understand is the MC on the MC level. That's the difference.
And we do CP.
And we also we do CP.
Okay, so that's something. So then we were right in thinking that there was some involvement by the sheriffs as it relates to eviction. We just happen to have the First Judicial District coming up next after your testimony. So we will ask that question. But it is something that the sheriff's office is capable of doing with its trained workforce, trained in dealing with those type of issues. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay. All right. I'll get with him on that. I got another question with respect to the budget. You're requesting additional 1.99, basically $2 million for your office for class 100 Can you just talk briefly about how that would rectify any shortcomings that you have in your budget on your Class 100 request?
I'll let the CFO, Patrick Lee, answer those questions.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I want to publicly thank Sheriff Law for assigning me to be a part of her administration as well, and working with a very wonderful group of individuals, both on the sworn and the civilian level. And I want to indicate this because the type of mandate that she gave us regarding getting the funding for the office has been paramount. Now, when you speak of Class 100, again, the overall impact is that those increases allow a seamless flow with regard to hiring and staffing the office as it should be. One of the mandates that Sheriff Law gave me when I came to the office was identifying the shortages both in personnel and the operating classes. So one, dealing with the question you posed with Class 100, yes, that increase would help us both with the civilian and sworn staff that would fill the gaps that you heard mentioned by the commanders that presented today. Without it, they cannot continue to do the work at the level that they're currently operating with, and it will continue to put a strain on their ability to respond to the requests that they often get through the sheriff, through the undersheriff, and through other means, whether it be through council staff and or other agencies that have seen the work of the office and would like the office to respond to its security needs and other measures. And I'll just weave in the operating classes as well. You heard in the sheriff's opening statement, is a stranglehold. When we are denied funding, you kill the very ability of these officers to perform. And that's the short and to the point scenario that's created. And since I've been here, I've seen several budget scenarios that have been supported by council, but have not been provided to us with all the support that council has given this office based on the justifications that we have submitted that truly identify the weaknesses, the shortages, and requirements that the officers and civilian staff have provided to us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. And just a couple brief remarks as well as questions. And I thank the sheriff and her team for your hard work and your dedication during the pandemic. And your team stepped up to the plate and kind of helped us get through a very, very trying time here in the city of Philadelphia. I want to also acknowledge you for making sure that in all of the gun violence and public safety strategies that myself and my colleague, the chairman of Public Safety Committee, and myself chairing the Special Committee on Gun Violence, when we talk about public safety and gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia, you're always stepping up to the plate and say, hey, now, let's just make sure that the sheriff's office is at the table so we can be a partner in addressing this issue. And to be quite frank with you, this is the first time, at least me serving as a former House member in the state, former House member as a state representative, and going on my third term as a council person. This is my first time having this level of participation. So I just want to thank you for stepping up to the plate. I want to thank you and your team for putting your lives on the line when you're doing the arrest warrants day in and day out, because it's not guaranteed that your officers are going to go back home when they're doing these arrest warrants. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that publicly and try to see how we can be supportive of your various requests regarding staffing. I think it's unacceptable that you have officers using their own cars doing arrests. I think that's totally unacceptable. So I want to be supportive of that aspect as well, because if we're asking your office to be partners in us addressing the issue of public safety, you should have the actual resources to be on equal playing foot as other law enforcement agencies here in the city of Philadelphia. So I just want to say that primarily for the record. I want to thank you all for for being totally transparent and explaining the issue regarding the guns and the armory at the Philadelphia Sheriff's Department, so we can separate fact from fiction, as well as the last incident with the young man life being taken in some type of association with a former member of the Sheriff's Office. So thank you for doing your due diligence and just being transparent to the members of this body, so we can all understand what actually took place. So I just want to start off by saying that. Give me an idea, because y'all have stepped up and taken on the responsibility of protection from abuse orders. And I remember about maybe a year ago, I had a hearing under the Special Committee on Gun Violence, particularly dealing with victims of gun violence, particularly around women and women being abused. And obviously, your department plays a significant role in helping protect women when it comes to protection from abuse orders. So give me an idea of the strategy around taking on this new responsibility, to how you're partnering with the Philadelphia Police Department and enforcing the PFAs, and then also the level of resources dedicated to this particular unit. And also shout out your Chief of Staff, Erica Davenport, for just staying on top of making sure you're sharp as well. And just want to make sure I give her a shout out there as well. I felt safe yesterday at an event that I was doing in South Philadelphia. I kind of walked in, the whole sheriff's squad was out there doing what y'all do. So, I just want to get a little props publicly for staying on the front line, making sure everybody on point. So, Sheriff Bilal, can you respond to those questions regarding PFAs?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to give it to Captain Thornton. That is his area. He's going to give you that strategy on dealing with PFAs.
Good afternoon, Councilman, Captain Thornton. When the PFA is generated, and again, Captain Noble's unit, Captain Hahn's unit, and myself, we pretty much all work together with the PFAs. PFAs are generated in family court. Captain Hahn is the commander. PFA is then taken to the warrant unit, worked up, get additional intel on the defendant to see if those offenders have warrants. You get pictures and things of that nature. Those that have warrants will stay with the warrant unit, and the rest of those PFAs will come to my unit, the civil enforcement unit. We'll go out and serve those PFAs. Typically, we try to get 2 or 3 attempts on a PFA and try to serve it, and an attempt to serve it. Once it's served, it's just pretty much done. They have a court hearing, it's a temp order, and it's served from that point on.
Talk to them a little bit about gun relinquishment part. Got you.
And as far as the gun relinquishment part of it, again, we have a list, a weekly list. My detectives will go out to the residents. For those who after 24 hours of being issued the PFA, who have not yet turned the weapon in, or maybe they don't have a weapon. We don't know, but we need to find out what's going on with that. We need to find out if that defendant actually, in fact, have a weapon. If they do not have a weapon, they'll sign an affidavit stating that fact, that they do not have a weapon. If they do have a weapon and they were served the PFA, we actually will relinquish it at that particular time, and it is turned into our armory until the completion of that PFA term, whether that's 2 or 3 years or whatever that is. So that's pretty much the process on that part. We also talk to the plaintiff at that time. We find out what's going on, just to get intel on that particular defendant, just to see, what measures we need to take in place to see how we're going to approach that defendant. Sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not. It all depends on the situation.
In reference to the PFA and the person that has a gun, and they sign an affidavit, what happens when they lie?
If it's known that they have a weapon, and that's according to the other police department, they have a list of people who are registered firearm owners. If they lie and say they don't have it, it's then turned over to the police department for further investigation. If they can't, for whatever reason, get the weapon, they will be prosecuted, and then it will be turned over to the DA's office.
And just this last part, we are always examining the homicide clearance rate from the Philadelphia Police Department for homicide as well as shootings. At what point do your office comes into play to go after those individuals who are just on the run for homicides and shootings? What role does the sheriff office play from that aspect? Because I guess, let's say if the homicide clearance rate, if the shooting clearance rate is around 40%, there's like a 60% chance that if I shoot up somebody in the neighborhood, I'm not going to get caught, right? But when these guys have outstanding warrants, arrest warrants, at what point does other law enforcement agencies say, listen, we got this outstanding warrant list, let's go get these guys off the street like ASAP?
Our deputies are a part of every task force that's going on in the city. We have a deputy in the FBI, we have a deputy in the Attorney General's office, we have a deputy in, who's the other one? In DIP. So any of those warrants dealing with homicides or fugitives, our deputies are playing that role. They can connect with our warrant unit that they're dealing with, or they'll go out with the task force on all those type of warrants. So anytime those warrants come into play, we are abreast of it. Our warrant unit can get that information, and while they're out, they can try to serve the warrant unit, try to serve those warrants. So by us coming together, we have another opportunity. We also do our own takedown, and we do that on different times of the year, and putting all those warrants together, working with all the different agencies, even those in Chester, Delaware, Philadelphia, all the Pennsylvania and Delaware agencies come together, even the FBI and the DEA and the ATF come together, and we go out through the whole city in a 3-day period, sometimes 4, on all of those warrants at different times and at different locations at the same time to basically try to capture those felons that are on the run. So we bring that together too.
Right, so I'm gonna wrap up on this. Just want you to know, and this is from the street perspective, this is the barbershop talk. When y'all engage in those type of operations, it sends a chilling effect through the hood. It sends a chilling effect, let me be more professional, it sends a chilling effect through the neighborhood, right? Attention when these type of warrant operations are actually taking place. And so, again, I commend you and your team. Hopefully in terms of all the armor that y'all need and everything else to make those type of operations effective, put that on the list as well. I'll collaborate with my colleagues because y'all should be supported. And this individuals on this call, I know for a fact, especially, again, my comrade in this issue, Councilman Jones, and my other colleagues as well, were just as passionate about this issue. You know, we go to sleep at night thinking about this issue day in and day out, right? We wake up working on this issue day in and day out. We texting one another, we calling one another, we trying to be supportive of one another and address these issues. And so we want you to feel supported because we're paying attention to how, at the end of the day, it's going to take all of us together addressing this issue. And you're not shifting responsibility. You're saying, here's what we can do. Here's our role. I think Councilman Harity kind of likes your approach as well. And so I just want to thank you and your team. I'm going to get off at this particular time with my questions. And if, again, Sister Rochelle, allowing your team, keep up the good work. We appreciate all that you are doing. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleague Johnson, for those points that you made, and they're so very true. I want to take you back, Sheriff Bala, before I ask my actual questions as well, to a point. Well, let's ask these questions. What is your complement of staff at the Sheriff's Department today?
Yes, this is Patrick Lee, sir. The current complement is a total of 343, both sworn and civilian.
Of that complement, what is the racial and male-female demographic, if you have that?
I think we do. It's in this chart. Hold on one second. Oh, here it is. That demographic is where we have broken down the females at 108, So the rest of that, out of 283, are males. And the demographics that go down to the exempt staff, which makes up 32 members of the overall staff. And the bulk of it is African American with 60 that are white.
All right. And how many in class 100? How many vacancies do you have?
Right. Go ahead.
Right now in class 100, we have 79 vacancies. We are due to be budgeted this year for 458. So we need to get to that number. Our serious problem with the budgeting is not only the funding, but how it's done. Class 100 has several classifications that affect the hiring, like injured on duty. If we have a higher rank of amount of injured on duty, which is not actually budgeted, it takes away from the amount of people that we can hire. So what happens is, even if we have budgeted for amount of people, it turns out by the time we get to the hiring point of view, our numbers are so badly cut that the sheriff has to get special consent to hire these people, and sometimes it takes too long. It's a money shortage and a body shortage.
Identify yourself.
That is Craig Martin, who is our chief budget officer. Let me say this: when I came into the office and looked at the numbers that we needed to hire, and when I said, okay, we need to hire these, let's start hiring them, then we can send them to training, I got from the mayor's office, no, we don't have the money. It takes 19 weeks. Matter of fact, it takes more than 19 weeks. 19 weeks is when they are up at the academy. And it takes from, 2 to 3 months to get them through the process of going up to the academy. So that delays our hiring of sworn personnel. If I say, we need these people, and we take them through that process, says, now let's hire them, and the city tells me, the mayor's office tells me, you don't have the funds, and then I look on my budget, said I'm budgeted for 428, and I have room to hire, and you're telling me I don't have the funds, I'm like, it's stalemate. That's a process. Not like you can come in today, interview them, and hire them the next day.
You have to train them.
Yes.
So all right, so if I understood you correctly, how many vacancies do you have? Give me that, just
79.
79.
Okay. What is your starting salary for a deputy sheriff?
Too low.
Agree, but what is it?
Back there?
That's the problem.
I had the church singing now. How much is the starting salary though?
You got the starting salary?
Yeah, 50, 55, 56,000.
That's terrible.
And what is the starting salary for a police officer in the city of Philadelphia?
67.
All right. And we are having
officers are getting paid more.
Right.
So the reason I raised that is we're having a general problem recruiting police officer candidates. As you know, Sheriff Bilal, you're up at that training academy far more frequent than I am, but those classes are getting smaller. We're having to have inducements to try to get people to sign up and train. What are we doing by way of the sheriff's office to hold serve, to be competitive with not only with the city of Philadelphia's police department, but surrounding counties? What is your strategy to fill those vacancies?
Well, we are out recruiting with experienced office deputies that are out there basically showing that this is a good job, one. We are also looking at surrounding counties in reference to what they get. But we're looking at the city, this class, in order to hire deputies, that we need to add signing bonuses like everybody else is getting today. We need to uptick on that salary. We need to add other positions, because our highest ranking position here in the sheriff's office, it just goes up to captain. Mm-hmm. We don't have an inspector, real position. We don't have a chief inspector, real position. We don't have a deputy chief, real position. Those are just commission, but come with those positions, there need to be salaries for those positions. Our captains, our salary is capped at like a sergeant in the police department.
So my point I'm making, and I'm building my case as Tariq Shabazz would build a case in his court, is that you're competing internally, externally.
Yes.
You have to keep up with what the market will bear by way of people who would be competitors. I say this to you, I say this to the prisons, that we have to be a part of that committee that President Clark and Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson have developed on personnel to make sure that we're being competitive. I only will say, and I'll close on this, you are not the, auxiliary of convenience when people remember you're there. I remember during the uprising and civil unrest, when all hell broke loose downtown, Captain Singleton, I heard him all night barking orders, and how almost that close it was out of control until you volunteered to help. And that message got to him. And what you were able to do is move those sheriff buses in place, I remember, and be that kind of overflow, a holding place so that it didn't get out of control, so that our officers could come back quickly and respond. You stepped up without being asked. And because you are members of the city, I never forgot that. And what I want to say is, I don't want there to be a pattern. So I met with the school district police, who are underfunded, underappreciated as well. And I go back to the first question I asked you about your demographics. And most of them are females. Most of them are people of color, and they are not treated in the same respect level as those people who are running in, serving warrants. I mean, you're running in, serving warrants, you're escorting prisoners, you're making sure our judges are safe, you're making sure the witnesses get to and from those courtrooms without being intimidated. We have to appreciate the job that you and your team do, and we have to do that by making you respected by way of dollars. You should never have second hand down equipment, whether it's shields, whether it's ballistics, whether it's tasers. You should be treated the same way first responders should be. And we're going to take a hard look at the details of your budget, and we're going to insist that it happen. So thank you and your team for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity.
Hello, Sheriff. Seems like all my colleagues know how I feel about you. I always say, for lack of a better word, you have intestinal fortitude. And during the COVID situation, I seen firsthand you getting involved yourself out there with me and the union members of Local 57, handing out food and PPE, and every other day you had us loaded truckloads of food for people and PPE. So I definitely want to thank you for everything you do. And you're probably one of my favorite law enforcement people that I have to deal with in this job, because you always try to say yes and get the job done. So thank you again for that. Thank you to your staff. And I spent a little time in the sheriff's office when I was younger as an exempt employee. So I know what it takes to do the job over there. I know all about the warrant unit. And nobody really understood that you guys do most of the warrant and rape murders for the city of Philadelphia. So, that takes a lot of skill and a lot of safe practices. So I appreciate you. I just have some questions to try to, as Councilman Jones said, build my case for funding, because I know full well that you are definitely underfunded. I'd like to know about IT. So how is the Sheriff's Office receiving IT support? And do you have adequate IT computer support systems to handle changes in the law enforcement and the complexity of sheriff sales that your agency is responsible for conducting? And do you have the appropriate personnel and the financial auditing system to respond to the city, state, and special audits that are demanded of your agency?
I'm gonna say this. Absolutely not. In one word, but I need to give more detail. Let me say this. This is 2023. When I came into office, what amazed me was, one, we have paper timesheets. I know from 1976 what paper timesheets can do and what they can't do. The second thing is, when I come in 2020, if a computer had a back to it that went this big and round, that was another issue that we needed to look at. So IT is very important to streamline 21st century type of traction, to keep in line, to know everything, to be able to do stuff. So my IT person is here and my CFO is here in reference to that part of that presentation.
Yes, sir. I'll start off briefly. That was another one of the mandates was upgrade the office and work to find the software and systems that will improve the efficiency for the staff and the sworn personnel. We started to do that process, and in conjunction with that, we were able to start the acquisition of major software systems, one of which you heard the undersheriff speak about, which was the Beast. We also were able to integrate Clear, which has helped with the warrants and clearing out old warrants, and some other software and services that we received. So I do want to give hats off to the Office of Information Technology, because they have helped us with identification with regard to those upgrades and making sure that we are identifying the right equipment to use to get this office to operate functionally. But during the course of that conversation, we found out as a row office, an elected office, we have to staff our own IT unit, which is going back to why we need consistent funding in Class 100. Without it, we won't be able to continue the upgrades and build the infrastructure that the sheriff is targeting to make sure that she can handle all her information technology operations in-house. And then the economic impact of that is that she will be able to hire individuals, both from an exempt perspective and civil service side, that can operate in the office. The funding has been limited. We've looked at a trend line of about 3 budget years, and we found out every time we requested the money for information technology, it got shot down after council supported our request.
Okay, moving on, just a couple more questions if I could try to get them in. I've seen the vehicles that you guys get, like we said, the hand-me-down stuff. How is your office engaging with fleet management to obtain new vehicles due to the condition of the other ones? And what types of training is required for your sworn staff to require special funding that requires special funding? And how can this funding be obtained through other sources? So is there other sources that we could try to reach out to get some more money too?
Yes, we are identifying hopefully some grant resources that may create an opportunity for our office. But to answer the first part of your question with regard to fleet, and I got to thank them and Dr. Wilson for their involvement, because they helped us get an estimate on the vehicles that we need to get replaced, that we submitted as a part of our budget as well. We also have, we've gotten support from the capital budget team to look at and identify vehicle resources as well, which they're hopefully going to complete up into and prior to the next round in October of this year. The scenario that we're dealing with as a whole regarding vehicle acquisition is that the replacements are needed, or at least we need to get them ordered. But again, we need to be supplied the money through the budget so we can transfer it to fleet so they can place the order. And again, we've been stonewalled to a certain degree with regard to getting those funds. In regards to training, the sheriff is paramount. She's big on training across the board. When I have to go and tell her, I said, ma'am, you have enough money for this, but you will not be able to train your civilian and sworn staff because, again, we've requested per employee a certain amount of money, and we have not gotten it to date. Even if the undersheriff wanted to do a special training for his team, we couldn't do it.
Well, in our last budget, our training and recreation was $1,200 budgeted.
That's just ridiculous. Sheriff, you know, I commend you on doing the job that you're doing, and you're everywhere. I see you everywhere. Your people are everywhere. You're always pitching in on something, like Curtis said, during the social unrest, toward COVID, by giving out the supplies. We need to give you a little bit more respect and give you some money so that you guys can take care of business. With the way crime is in the city of Philadelphia, we need all the help we can get, and getting them warrants served safely is a big part of it. It's a big part of getting people that are doing these crimes off the street. So I commend you. I commend your people, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Hey, good afternoon, Council President. Real quick, I just want to thank the sheriff and her team, first and foremost, for attending our food giveaway this Saturday. Like other council members said, the sheriff and her team, they're always out and about in neighborhoods, whether it's a shooting that have taken place, and we call the sheriff's office to protect family for a balloon release, whether it's issues in a juvenile facility, and we call them for emergency transportation, or probably countless other things that I'm not even thinking of. I'm glad to hear that there's a bigger appetite from council members to see an increase in the sheriff's budget. This is something that I actually fought for last year when we were trying to clean some stuff up at the end of the year. We tried to throw a few more bucks over to the sheriff's office to be able to help deal with public safety related issues. And unfortunately, we didn't get it done. So hopefully some of the things that was just discussed today, we can put ourselves in a position to be able to address some of the public safety issues that we have that the sheriff's office has been trying to step up to address, but unfortunately haven't been able to do so. Also want to say thank you to the folks from the Revenue Department and other city government agencies that was with us on Saturday as we gave out a bunch of stuff. That's it. I just, wanted to add those comments to the record and make sure that we continue to put ourselves in a position to be able to get the sheriff's office the resources that they need so they can help address the safety issues. And again, thank you to the sheriff's office for being there. Vicky Riley from Revenue and a couple other city folks was there Saturday. It really helped make Saturday a huge success. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Sheriff Bilal. Very much appreciated. Very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other questions for members of this witness? There being none. Sheriff, I want to thank you and your team so much for your service. We appreciate all the work you do for the city of Philadelphia. As always, you may be called back for other budget-related items, just in case. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Next up, we will have the First Judicial District. The First Judicial District ready and prepared to tee up.
I am here, Council President.
Mr. McSorley, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
Can't complain. Okay, we now hear from Rich McSorley on the First Judicial District's testimony. Please proceed, sir.
Good afternoon, Council President and members of Council. I will try to be brief. I've been watching all day. I know everyone's had a long day. I'm here representing the First Judicial District for the fiscal year of 2024. I represent the Administrative Governing Board made up of the 6 judicial leaders and the State Court Administrator and myself. Our ask in our budget this year is 272, 822, 182 million. That's general fund and grant combined. You do have my statement, so I won't go through my entire opening statement. I will just highlight two asks on top of our budget ask. And again, I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. We have a budget ask for a mental health clinic increase. We've had a mental health unit that is staffed by independent doctors that the court has hired. We're asking for an additional $875,000 in increased funding for that court-ordered clinicians and doctors. These doctors, even though they're referred to as a clinic, it is court clinicians who are contracted by the FJD. They perform mental health evaluations for both pretrial and pre-sentencing matters. Their mission is to provide quality and comprehensive reports, which allows for proper recommendations in sentencing and to protect the community by intervening in the lives of those we serve. This unit has been around for 17 years and has never had an increase. We are now in contract negotiations with them, and they have indicated that it's time for an increase. I can't say that I blame them. The reality is that if the FJD cannot afford an increase and keep this unit operating, we might not be able to support it. So it's very important for us to try to keep this mental health unit going. These doctors perform mental health evaluations at the Stout Center every day that we're open. They perform them at the prison. There is no other court that I know of that has its own mental health doctors on place. We can perform these mental health evaluations, what we call forthwith, almost immediately. It prevents people from languishing in custody with a mental health evaluation waiting to be done, and the case gets continued and continued. In order to get a mental health evaluation done, ours can be done fairly quickly, and I think that addresses a lot of the mental health needs that we have. This unit also, over the years, we just had an audit done with the Department of Behavioral Health, and they've made a lot of requests and upgrades in order to help this unit. And again, that's an increase in basically funding in order to carry out their suggestions. The other one ask I have is, I asked for it last year. We're still struggling with our courtroom audio upgrades. The Stout Center opened in 1996 and has the same sound system and same microphones and same audio system that it was there when the building was built. I think that they're transistors and radios now. Tubes, I don't know. We can't even get parts. We're literally going on Craigslist. I did ask for this before, that we need to overhaul the entire audio system. That really goes to access to justice for all participants in the court system, for them to be able to hear what's going on in the court, for the court to be able to hear properly, for the jurors to be able to hear. It's a desperately needed overhaul that has to be done. The court, we are going forward with an RFP to try to find an exact cost, but it is something we would like to have help from City Council. So above our general fund ask and our grant funding, which I hope that the council approves and adopts in whole, as it's already been submitted, we have these two asks on top of it. And as I said, my testimony has already been sent in writing, and I believe that there's probably questions about some other matters that council has. So I'll end my opening statement, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your opening statement, and thank you for your service as always. Do have a couple of questions to start out with. One kind of piggybacks off of the last testimony of the sheriff's office. I know you've been hearing a lot about this, about the eviction unit, the incident over near 25th and College Wall, person shot by a contractor who was contracted by an arm of the court system. And I actually, I guess probably most people thought that the sheriff's office handled all the evictions, but lo and behold, apparently from the court system, you contract some of that work out. Can you kind of talk us through that? And I know that it may be a pending case, so not necessarily any questions about the specific case, but this the whole process of how this came about to have private contractors as opposed to the sheriff's office.
Just one side thing, I forgot to introduce, sitting to my right, Christopher Waters, who is the DCA of Finance. So if you have any budget further questions, he's here to assist me. That landlord-tenant office of the Philadelphia Municipal Court is a separate entity, as has been mentioned. It actually came around about 1969. It has been around for over 30 years. And I know a lot of people didn't know it existed until this time. That might go to that the process has been working pretty well for a long time. It is an independent entity. The president judge of the Philadelphia Municipal Court appoints the landlord-tenant officer, and then that landlord-tenant officer is allowed, and by statute, by law, is allowed to hire her own writ servers or his own writ servers and perform writs and alias writs of eviction. When people come in to file, they are given two options, as was I heard in the testimony earlier. They can use the writ servers private entity, or they can choose the sheriff. The sheriff is an option. The sheriff is legally allowed to do the municipal court writs and the alias writs, and they also do the court of common pleas writs. So when someone comes in to file, it is the landlord who is the one who makes that decision. There is a financial difference between going private or going to the sheriff. There is an amount of time that the eviction can be served. The sheriff, as we all just heard, has a lot of resources that are very tight and strapped right now. So many times when the landlord comes in, and I just have to point out that a lot of people think, and especially with this incident, that the landlords we're talking about are these big conglomerate landlords and these big companies. A lot of the landlords that we have are pro se people. They got the license to rent out the extra apartment or house or whatever they have. By law, they have to have somebody do the eviction. They cannot do it themselves. We all know we don't want self-help. And they can choose this landlord-tenant officer. But again, this was created by law. It was not something that is an arm of the court, and it's not something that the FJD created. And all that said, just to let everyone listening know, I have talked to President Judge Dugan as recently as this morning. We met yesterday. He has the same concerns, I believe, as everyone else. He is in communication with the landlord-tenant officer. We are looking for information on how they operate and how we're going to go forward. So we're still in that communication cycle ourselves right now. And one more, I've been told, a little research historically, that this was brought up to replace constables. I know a lot of people are saying around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that they use the sheriff to do a lot of these evictions. The sheriff is always an option if the county has a sheriff. But a lot of these other counties use constables, which are like private contractors. They get paid per eviction too. They had constables in Philadelphia way back in the day before 1969. I was born, but was not reading the newspaper at the time. But I heard that the system back then had a lot of problems. I've heard that the constable system is constantly having different issues and hurdles they have to overcome. So at one point, way before any of us, I think, were in office, the landlord-tenant officer position was created legislatively in order to address some of those issues and not use the constable system in Philadelphia. I believe that was the main reason for its origination.
Okay, so I'm assuming this was state statute?
Yes.
The state statute that's created, and you say it created the landlord-tenant officer?
The landlord-tenant officer, and it allows the president judge of municipal court to appoint that officer.
Okay, so there is a connection to the local municipal court judge.
Correct.
And that officer has a budget and staff and all of that?
That is all. They do not get any money from the Philadelphia Municipal Court or the First Judicial District. They collect their own fees when the landlords file, and that is how they do their income. I'm not really privy to how they operate, but we don't give them staff. They don't use our computer systems. They don't use our building. They're a completely separate entity with their own separate source of income and their own separate budget.
And there's no general fund dollars that are used towards that.
General fund dollars from the city of Philadelphia?
From the court, from the FJD. We don't.
You're saying two. I'm hearing two different things.
No, he's saying there are no general fund dollars.
There are no.
I'm sorry.
They're not. Just want to make that clear. That it's separate from our.
They're solely dependent on fees generated from evictions.
Correct.
And paid for by the private landlord.
Correct.
That's bizarre. All right. And the accountability is to whom?
The landlord-tenant officer is only appointed by the president judge. The statute does not require the courts to have any kind of oversight or management of this entity.
Wow. That's pretty archaic.
Well, as
Okay,
I said,
so-
it was created a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is even more bizarre than I thought. Okay, so I guess we would have to get information, have to deal with the landlord tenant officer themselves, since they apparently are operating off the grid and we have no sense of oversight over what money they generate, how they generate it, any expenditures. Is there training required for the officers that they hire? I mean, or they
Council
just...
President, these are the exact same questions that Judge Dugan is having a conversation with the landlord-tenant officer now.
Okay.
We're all asking the same questions.
All right. Okay.
And I can tell you, I'm talking to Judge Dugan, when we do go further down the road with these discussions, we will include City Council.
Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah, because as you know, the initial inquiries we got here was, the Philadelphia Sheriff's Department, and I know that Sheriff Bilal is happy that it wasn't one of her people. Okay.
And to be clear, it wasn't one of our people either.
All right. So the president judge. All right.
That's President Judge Dugan, to be clear. Patrick.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there'll be significant. Sounds like that's as far as you can go in terms of providing information on the process. But I guarantee you there'll be some follow up with whomever we need to check on. There was another issue that came up. One of the prior, it was actually the district attorney, about testimony about warrants for vehicle searches in particular, and some of the other things as it relates to the timing. And the district attorney indicated that one of the challenges that police officers have when they stop a vehicle in the middle of the night and they need to get a warrant, the accessibility of that activity is limited at best because the first judicial system is not working. I guess judges aren't obviously working or doing whatever they do to be able to issue a warrant. And he suggested that somehow if we were able to have some process that allowed the Philadelphia Police Department to get a nighttime warrant as opposed to waiting until 8 o'clock in the morning. And they basically can't obviously hold a car for that long. Is that
absolutely?
Is that accurate, or is that?
Absolutely not, Council President. I have to say, I sat here and I watched that, and my head spun around. Early in my career, I worked in the Philadelphia Municipal Court, and I was appointed as a bail commissioner that are now called arraignment court magistrates. I've worked many a midnight shift, many a Christmas holiday, many a weekend, sitting down in the basement of the Stout Center in the 24/7, 365 operating courtroom. All of those arraignment court magistrates are able to sign arrest and search warrants. And in fact, the arrest warrant process has been electronically enhanced so that the police don't have to leave their district. They can log into a system called PARS, have their arrest warrant signed, and they just kicked off, I think about a month ago, the search warrant aspect of PARS. So now the officers don't have to leave their district. They can get a search warrant electronically signed and reviewed through the PARS system and never have to come to the Stout Center. But any officer looking for any warrant at any time of the day or night can get that signed within minutes if they go to the Stout Center. Now, Mr. Krasner would say, well, some of these warrants we don't want to go to an arraignment court magistrate. We have an emergency judge available on all off hours from the Philadelphia Municipal Court and the Court of Common Pleas. So I don't know who he's talking to or where he got his information, but he said he was in the system for about 34 years. I've been here for about 40, and I have never seen an officer have to wait 6 hours to get a warrant signed in all of my years of working here. We've always had a 24/7 system available.
Okay. All right, well, that's, I want to give Mr. McDermott kudos for putting the sheriff's office, the DA, and the First Judicial District in the same platform at the same time, because we're getting clarity on various information, because that sounded like something that should have been easily resolved if it's simply a matter of being able to get a warrant to find out somebody has guns in the car or whatever. And the fact that, as was said in earlier testimony.
Can I get a point of clarity real quick on that question right there, please?
Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
So I'm in a queue, so I'll come back with my official questions, but specifically for this issue that Council President is talking about right now. So what we've been told multiple times is that because of a recent Supreme Court ruling, we're now in a position where as though you can't just search the car, and sometimes getting the warrant can take hours. I remember listening to a story even where something happened with the car and the police officers had to either drive the car somewhere or something had to be done to get the warrant in order to search the car. So are you telling us that the recent Supreme Court ruling does not change the requirements that's needed to search a car when an incident has taken place?
No, I'm not saying that. The law is still the law. What I'm saying is that it was implied that the long-term wait was because of unavailability of appointing or issuing authority to sign a search warrant. If the police stop a car in 95 and they believe that it has to be searched, they can sit at the scene or impound that car, and immediately a detective can, at his desk, enter a search warrant into the system, get it approved by the district attorney, and the DA has to approve every search warrant. So I don't know if their people are available midnight shifts, but our people are, and that warrant can be brought before an issuing authority and signed. So the law is you still have to get the search warrant. The question that I took it from Mr. Krasner was that they couldn't get that warrant signed and they couldn't get a process. Well, if they get a process, we're available to sign it 24/7, 365. Always have been.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. And there clearly needs to be some clarity between First Judicial. I mean, this different perspectives. And again, it sounds like something, if that's the case, then something will be easily resolved, but it's sounding like that's not necessarily the case. Okay. Yeah, because at some point we're going to get all this together,
I hope so.
Yeah. All right. I actually do have a couple of questions, but I'm gonna say that because I know we are having some off the grid conversation about some other issues. Let me recognize Councilman Jones first. Okay, can somebody all right, there you go. Councilman Jones?
Yes, sir. It's not me.
No, I know it wasn't you, sir. You.
Thank you. And Administrator.
Hold on, Councilman. Can somebody mute themselves because we got a lot of background noise going on? Please. Thank you. You're not speaking. Proceed, please. Sorry, Mr. Jones. Councilman Jones.
That's all right. Councilman, it's good calling me Mr. It's good to see you again. I think you've been on board now a year or a little more now.
I have been on board for a little over 2 years. I know, hard to believe.
2 years, geez. Oh, okay. All right.
And also, I think that background noise might be the trumpet player outside my city hall window here. So I don't know if you're hearing him, and he's not very good.
So I want to kind of thank you. We've been through a lot together during the height of COVID, when the courts were shut down and all of those things that we've managed through it. But now that we are through it, what I wanted to kind of focus on is how can we keep that same system at the height of the pandemic, when we're trying to get people that should not be held up on State Road. We operated in some pretty emergency type of scenarios. How can we keep that going? We are still kind of high on the census, according to Commissioner Carney yesterday. How can we continue to review that process with the prisons, with your courts, to make sure that those people who can be reviewed and moved into other types of custody, how can we continue that sense of urgency when we still have overcrowding up on State Road? We still have personnel needs up at the prison. We're short the number of correctional officers. How are we doing with that process, and what can we do better?
Well, working with you side by side over so many different things, Councilperson Jones, I think we can always do better. I think that's something you and I have always agreed on. We have learned some things from the pandemic. We have things like our EBR now, our early bail review. So every case that has a bail under, I believe, $250,000 gets an automatic review within 3 days, 5 days, within 5 working days, or 5 working days. So before, people would have bail set, you'd wait for your next listing, or unless the Commonwealth or the defense took some sort of appeal. But now the court has this EBR, which we're doing via video up at the prison. So everybody in the prison on that bail gets an automatic EBR hearing. The district attorney is there, the defender is there, the court is there. If possible, they try to release that person under other conditions, or the bail can be reduced, whatever we can do. So that's one of the steps. One of the things we've also implemented because of the pandemic, we do a lot of our hearings, like our Gagnon 2 hearings for people on violation of probation detainers. You'd have to have them brought down once, brought down twice. Now we do a lot of that via video. For a while, the municipal court was operating a preliminary hearing court up at the prison. I know that is not operated since, I believe, a few months, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. It was hard for people to staff, I understood that, but we did have a judge up there. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that we have made strides. I do know the census is high. It's amazing to me to think back when I was sitting on your committee that the census was around 9,000 to 10,000.
We have made progress.
Yeah, but now we're saying 4,500 is high, and it is. I believe that anything we can do in order to reduce it, we should do. Back in the pandemic, you're right, we did have a special release hearings where we reviewed a lot of people in custody, try to get as many people out as possible. That is something I'm sure the court could sit down with the justice partners and try to review that again. I will say that there is a prison population committee that meets monthly with all the justice partners and the prison, and they go over the census every month. And they have that discussion. They made a lot of progress with MacArthur money. So it is an ongoing conversation. I don't want you to think that, we're out of the pandemic and now we're going to sit back. We're still having those conversations, and we're still trying to make improvements.
So we've gotten complaints from family members that have said that their loved one is up State Road and has been there 300 days and has not gotten a trial. So I know those might be outliers, but I'd love to sit down with you and that group to see what we can do to keep things moving in the right direction. So I appreciate that willingness to work together. One of the things that you mentioned when the CJC was built, what year was that?
I believe it was 95 or 96. I was working in City Hall Annex at the time.
So I remember when it was built because my signature is on there. So that outdated system of what is that? The system of microphones and what is that you want to update?
It's our whole audio system in all the courtrooms. And we went to public property and we asked them, hey, we're the tenant in the building. We would like to get an upgrade. My analogy has always been if I had an apartment and I had that little, box that I could let people in and talk to people and get deliveries, and it broke, I would go to my landlord. Well, we went to public property and they said, no, that's actually it's not a fixture. It's going to have to come out of your budget. Why don't you go to City Council and ask City Council? So I am asking City Council for the second year.
So we want to help. We want to help you with that because there is a belief that can be a lot more efficient in reducing the amount of wait time that police officers have down there. So I think that at the end of the day, it's a damn good investment. And we're going to take a look at what that would cost and want to help you out with that. All right. I'll save my other questions for the next round. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to our President Judge, who's not here today, as well as the leadership over at First Judicial District. Last summer, I spent a lot of time in the courts looking at some of the issues that we're facing as it relates to the gun violence in the city of Philadelphia. And it was an honor to work with a lot of the judges on a number of different issues as it relates to things we can do to address the crime in the city of Philadelphia. So just want to start by thanking everybody over there, as well as partnering around the driving equality legislation. I shouldn't say partnering, but having dialogue around the driving equality legislation and legality of it. So I appreciate the leadership at First Judicial District for both things. My first question. It's been communicated to City Council that there's a rites of passage program in Texas where we're looking at placing folks, young people specifically, because of some of the issues that we have with our juvenile facilities. Can you give me some preliminary thoughts as it relates to if this is something that's really going to happen?
I'm not aware of this program or project. I know that we are having a difficulty with the JCJC and the overcrowding. We are taking steps with our justice partners, and I think right now we still have about 70 plus juveniles in that system that should be out of there and going to state institutions. But I don't know about this program from Texas. I can definitely get more information and talk to family court and have an offline discussion with you.
That would be great. I mean, for us, we recognize the issue with the overcrowding. We've tried our best. And I know Councilmember Jones was just on him, myself, the members. We tried our best to put ourselves in a position to address the overcrowding. We tried our best to sound the alarm to the state. We know it's still an issue that's very prevalent. And we're going to continue to work with you as well as other folks to advocate for that. Let me just put on the record that I definitely would not be a fan of sending our young people to Texas. I think that could be something that could create a level of problems that we're not necessarily anticipating right now. I know that it's dark and gloomy as it relates to a lot of the issues that we have as it relates to placement with young people anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I know firsthand how hard we all have been working to try to address the placement issue, talking to different counties, see if they would be open to taking our young people. And I know that we're at a stalemate right now. But I would just ask that before we get to a space and a place where we send young people to, all the way across the country, that we all huddle and figure out what emergency options we come up with. That was very controversial to allocate money towards building prisons and juvenile detention centers and things of that capacity. But at the end of the day, I would much rather put money into, new group home spaces and other things of that capacity to make sure that young people who do have some type of run-in with the law are able to serve their time near their family and relatives and loved ones. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about restorative practices, that is the best way to ensure that people are able to return to society and be productive members of society. So I just wanted to put that information on the record. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
I just want to say I appreciate the what you're saying, council person, because I know the collaboration was a big deal, a big solution about getting this addressed. I don't think we could have done it unless everybody came to the table. It wasn't just a court order is going to make things change. I know Judge Ochevsky, the supervising judge, and Judge Murphy, the administrative judge over in family court, would be more than willing to sit down, and we all have to solve this together. And I agree with you. I don't know about this program sending people to Texas, but it doesn't sound like something I would want to happen.
I appreciate that. Appreciate your comments on that. And I'm not going to go any further on that issue. But if there's anything that changed, we just ask that you communicate that at the us so we can bring all options before that becomes something that's possible. When I spent a lot of time at First Judicial District, we talked about some of the issues that dealt with the building. And I heard you talk a little bit about that during Councilmember Jones's questions. So I'm wondering, are there resources or dollars that needed to be allocated to address things like we talked about the technology around fingerprinting to make sure that when officers are called to gun court, that they're not called at a time where they're on vacation, because we know that those coordinations and things like that don't help us. I've also been made aware of like other issues with the actual physical building, leaking sewage, things of that capacity. So when you're talking about your requests for more money, how much of your requests address those issues that I just communicated?
The request I came to with hat in hand and didn't want to ask for everything was just for the audio system in the Scout Center. I know what you're talking about. The police are working with us to put in a system where first they had a fingerprint identification for the police to know where they were in the Scout Center. Now that I think they're using some sort of facial recognition system that they're going to install. But I mean, the reality is that building was built in 1996 and all the technology in there is the same technology it was from the first day that I went in there. So everything needs to be upgraded, even to the point of, I'll have to say it, it's almost embarrassing sometimes. We are the 5th largest court system in the United States. We have people coming in for, terrible circumstances. They're coming into a criminal courthouse and they're tripping over rugs with duct tape on them. The blinds are so dried out that they can't be closed or opened anymore. So the whole system, like a lot of other places, I understand that, but the entire Scout Center and a lot of the court facilities, which we don't own, are in dire need of repair. So I would be more than happy to sit down with anybody who's willing to listen and try to work with public property or try to work with anyone to try to get any of our buildings in a better state of repair. Even the benches, they fall apart sometimes. It's an old building. It's 1996. A lot of feet and a lot of volume of people have gone through that place.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Thank you, Council President. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity.
Hello again, Council President. Hello, First District.
Hello, Councilman.
I already got a couple of small questions. First, how is the First Judicial District offering additional programs which would give self-represented litigants access to free counsel? And then the second part was, where in the process is the First Judicial District in finalizing a contract with a new case management provider? And what is the expected lag time between awarding the contract and full implementation of the new system?
So, thank you for those questions. To answer your first question, self-represented litigants, we do have the Elder Justice and Civil Resource Center that is available to anyone who comes in order to get help in trying to file any kind of civil case. In Philadelphia Municipal Court, which it's commonly referred to as the People's Court, the Small Claims and Landlord-Tenant Court, we have the Lawyer of the Day program. We have attorneys there, especially for Landlord-Tenant Court, that give free advice and help people with their filings. We have mediation programs in Small Claims, Landlord-Tenant Court, and basically in the Philadelphia Municipal Court Civil Division that assists people as they come in to file. In the criminal system, we don't have too many self-represented litigants for obvious reasons. Family Court also has people available in the first filing units and programs that when people come in, if they have to file for support, dependency, we will assist those people to the best of our ability without giving legal advice. And even our Orphans Court, we have the same ability to try to assist people. We've recently just gone over our website. It was an initiative, I think, started by the AOPC to try to make it more plain language. We try to get away from a lot of the lawyer language, a lot of the descriptions that just were very hard to follow. I can tell you I'm an attorney, and even reading some of the website descriptions on how to do things and how to file an eviction or how to file for support was very cumbersome. So we painstakingly went through plain language lessons, talked to a lot of different people, and we got those websites and that information we hope to a place where people can better understand it. The second question you had was
Case management system.
the case management system. The case management system. The case management system is going to be up to a $9 million ticket for the First Judicial District. We've been planning for this for years and years and years. And I am happy to say that we are very, very close to finally having the vendor awarded to sign the contract. I believe we just received the contract a week or so ago, and we are painstakingly going through it because we know that once we sign this contract, we're locked into this case management system for the rest of our lives, or for the rest of the time that I'm going to be here. This new system is not going to just be civil case management. It's going to, this Philadelphia Municipal Court Civil is going to use it, the Common Pleas Civil, the Traffic Division, and the Family Court will be using it for e-filing. So, and Orphans Court, and it will encompass the entire FJD, which I've, again, been here for a long time, and I don't know of any system that reaches out and touches all the different courts the way this will. That's the good news. I think we will have a signed document by May. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is they're telling us that the full project is probably a 5-year project from start to finish. And we'll probably do one division at a time, start turning things on as it happens. I hope that answered your question, Councilman.
It did. I was writing along with you. I'm sorry. Just get my facts straight. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's really all I had. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Council President. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you very much. Mr. McSorley, thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being here. I just want to do a follow-up in regards to when you hosted the City Council several years ago, Cure Report.
You're breaking up a bit, Councilman. You're breaking up, I can't.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Must be your system, because I think I've been clear pretty much all day. So let me know in the event that you can't hear me, okay?
I think it's because you took off the pen hoodie, and now that you changed, did something to the sound. That's. I'm not a technical guy, but that's where I'm going.
You picked up on that, so that means you were around day to day. So I just want to do a follow-up, Richard, regarding the Cure Report around the issue of diversity and inclusion at the First Judicial District, kind of see what kind of progress that happened as relates to that particular report. And just a small refresher based upon the report. On page 44 of the report, it says, overall staff and judges at the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania report working with a culturally diverse staff and feel respected in the workplace. Most staff indicate that they will see themselves working at the First Judicial District in the next 2 years. Judges and staff believe that the First Judicial District policies promote fairness.
I'm losing you again, Councilman. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Somebody can everybody please mute if you're not speaking?
Unfortunately, President Clark, I think that might be me because like the motorcycle that's outside my window going by is, yeah.
I guess we can't have you mute. All right. We'll have to fight through it then.
Do we mute during the question?
Yeah, you might as well mute during the question. Maybe that'll.
Sure. So I think if you actually mute your, you are muted. Okay. So that shouldn't be a problem. So it also goes on to say, it is noteworthy that although staff rate First Judicial District leadership moderately in its commitment to treating employees respectfully, ratings noticeably decline in most other domains related to leadership support for equity-related conversations. The lack of support for these conversations in the court system, where there have been widely known instances of racism, can foster a culture of implicit and explicit bias and brand marginalized people expressing these concerns as troublemakers rather than whistleblowers. We find that among some white staff and judges, there is a sense of disbelief that institutional and structural racism are a significant factor in modern society. It goes on to say, although many staff believe that nepotism would never be addressed at First Judicial District, it is clear that judges and administrative leadership are deeply aware of its presence and are either unwilling to change it or do not believe that they have the capacity to challenge it. While this system works for many staff hired through political connections, Black staff in particular report not being promoted, not receiving recommendations for promotions, and having to fight for menial increases in salary. These tensions are causing additional stress on staff of color who spoke about not only having to do their jobs, but also serve as a support system to each other, acting as psychiatrists on top of everything else. And I think we're all aware during that committee hearing about several incidents that happened regarding a couple of judges over there and acts of racism and intimidation. And I need to get more detail I can, but most of us in this on this council body that participate in the hearing are aware of such an incident. So I just want to get an idea of the progress that have been made. I know we did hire a DEI person under First Judicial District. That person stayed on for a little bit and then left and moved on. So have we hired a new person? Have we taken into consideration some of the recommendations regarding diversity and inclusion and implicit bias as relates to First Judicial District and its staff?
So thank you for the question, Councilman Johnson. And I do know everything you're referencing. I was there too, and we did have these conversations before. And a couple of points I want to make. One, the CURE report was in 2019. It was commissioned by the FJD itself, but I don't think we use the CURE report. I don't want to think of the CURE report as something we have to answer to now, but something we learned something from when we've moved forward. And to be honest, the FJD, the administration of the FJD, the makeup of the FJD, the whole world just about is different than it was in 2019. And I believe we have made significant strides in this area, not nearly where I want to be, but I think we have improved greatly. Sitting to my left, a little off camera, is my new DEI chief, Cordell Webb, who is an attorney, who is our new DEI chief, who is DEI certified, and has made significant strides in the FJD, from everything from training to working with HR. So just to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing, we have decided to review all of our HR policies and look at them in an equity and inclusive way, in a non-gender way. Again, changing our language, changing the way we're thinking with Cordell's leadership, going through them page by page, letter by letter, to make sure that we're on the right track. We have overhauled our hiring policy. We've looked at the jobs that we have, those jobs that some required some sorts of education. We re-looked at them to make sure that we did that education that wasn't really needed or wasn't being a barrier. We have hiring policy. There are rules about the policy itself. There are rules about the applications and rules about having a hiring panel. There are rules about having what kind of questions you can ask, and they have to be the same kind of questions. There are rules about how those questions are graded. And all of this is constantly being looked at by administration, by the DEI chief. We have our suggestion documents, which we have for all the, so that if they do have an issue, they do have that, I'm afraid to step forward, they have a way to communicate that to the DEI chief, to the court administrator. And I can tell you from somebody who looks at that box all the time, we've had over 430 different suggestions. We answer each and every one. There's never one that we say, well, we'll have to get to that one later, or how are we going to do this? We answer everything that comes through. And Cordell does his own training. We brought in supervised training, outside training. One of the things he has done is he's customized the training to the different groups. The training that you have for judges is not the same training you have for court officers. It's not the same training you have for office staff.
When you say DEI training?
Yep, gentlemen, can I interrupt for 1 second? I got a little information out. I've been informed that the Channel 64 OIT feed may terminate at 5 o'clock. We may go past that, likely with maybe a few other questions, but I just want to say for the record that we will, at the end of this committee hearing, be in recess until Tuesday, April 11th at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in a remote manner using Microsoft Teams for the record. Not sure when that feed will cut off, but we want to make sure that we do indicate the recess hearing on April the 11th. Thank you. Please continue.
Just to, I guess, to close it up, unless you have additional questions, Council Member, Pradell, who's sitting with me now, and myself, I think we have reached out to your office before. We are both of us are more than willing to come down and have a face-to-face conversation with you. I value your input, I value your insight, and we are willing to have any kind of conversation anytime with you, right down the hall.
Hey, Richard, I just want to say thank you for always being a class act. I remember when you took on this position, you just stepped your chest right in and said, hey, you know, there's some things that we need to fix, and we're going to address these issues. And so from that time period to now, I do see the progress. I just want to personally just thank you for just stepping up and just saying, let me dig right deep into this issue and beginning addressing it. And so I see the progress that we've made thus far, and I definitely make sure I'll take you up on that offer and find some time to get with you. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
I will be brief. What I'd like to know, how many CP judges do we have? How many MC judges do we have? And what other judges do you oversee?
I don't oversee any of the judges, thankfully. I didn't say that, did I? I can tell you I'm here to assist our judiciary in any way that I possibly can in order for them to do the job that they do so well. We have 129 judges total. I'm not sure what the breakdown is, but I can get that for you. I believe it's 25 or 6 MC judges, but I can definitely get that to you.
The other thing for the record, how many specialty courts did you have, do you have, and what you would recommend?
Well, we have a number of specialty courts, especially the municipal court, where when I think of specialty courts, I think of Veterans Court, I think of the DUI treatment court, I think of the treatment court itself, all of our diversionary courts. We are struggling with some of our diversionary courts because the reality is we're not getting the defendants that we once got because they're not being charged. One big example comes to mind is our Dawn Court, which was very, very efficient in helping some of the victims who were prostituted out in the streets and trying to get those men and women into court, into treatment, doing what we could to assist them. I think that in the last 6 months or more, we've only had 2 people referred to Dawn Court because the arrests aren't being made anymore. So a lot of our programs still exist that we had before. We have taken some of the programs like Gun Court and changed it into something different in the Court of Common Pleas with our non-fatal shooting court, trying to streamline homicide cases. We have a homicide assignment system now that is more streamlined. We have a majors judge kind of calendar room that Court of Common Pleas under Judge Clemens has instituted. And in fact, I just had information from her that our clearance rate right now, we're fully back up to rocking and rolling with juries and our trials. And our clearance rate, I think, for the last 6 months was 133%. So all the specialty courts we've always had, we have just, I don't know if I would call them specialty courts, but I would call them specialty programs that we're using to work with our justice partners to address everything from the prison overcrowding to the gun pandemic and everything in between.
Could you send the president a list of those specialty programs / courts so that he can distribute it for FYI to the members?
Absolutely.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. There are no additional questions by members of the committee for this witness. The committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, April 11th at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in a remote manner using Microsoft Teams. Thank you all very much, and thank you all the witnesses for their testimony.
Good job, Good job.
Thank you. President Clark, thank you, and thank you for your service. I'm going to miss you at the next budget hearings.
If people keep saying that, I'm going to come back. They better stop saying that. No. Not that much money in the world. right.
I believe it. I believe it. Thank you.
See you guys. All right.